Sorry.
Good evening.
Seventh, 2023 Town Council meeting. I'd like to start with some introductions. To my left and your right is our Assistant Town Manager, Malia Gordon, Commissioner Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, our Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, who just got back from Atlanta a few minutes ago, I think, our Town Manager Becky Hawk, our Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tefano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, our Town Clerk Lori Canapino, our Planning Director Jay Camp, and our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith. You may have noticed as you came in tonight that our flag was at half staff, and today we're remembering a terrible event that happened in American history. Of course, 9/11 that we all remember. And I think everybody that's of a certain age remembers what they were doing at the exact moment that that happened. And I was only a few hundred yards from this seat right here over at my office in Cambraco. And we all watched in disbelief, and nobody said a whole lot. We just kept watching television and the planes hitting the towers, and it was really terrible. But in honor of all those that perished and were injured or maimed, I'd like to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. In lieu of invocation tonight, I'd like to read an email that came across my desktop this morning that I thought was very appropriate on 9/11. Probably remember after 9/11, I think it's the most together Americans have acted in my lifetime. You know, people pulled together. It didn't matter what your race was, what your political party was. We all pulled together as Americans. And given the very disparate and separate condition we find ourselves in now, with folks on the far right and far left both spewing a lot of vitriol, I'd like to read a statement from 13 presidential centers. The unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, are principles that bind us together as Americans. They have enabled the United States to strive toward a more perfect union, even when we have not always lived up to those ideals. As a diverse nation of people with different backgrounds and beliefs, democracy holds us together. We are a country rooted in the rule of law, where the protection of rights of all people is paramount. At the same time, we live among our fellow citizens, underscoring the importance of compassion, tolerance, pluralism, and respect for others. We, the undersigned, represent a wide range of views across the breadth of issues. We recognize that these views can exist peaceably, side by side, when rooted in the principles of democracy. Debate and disagreement are central features in a healthy democracy. Civility and respect in political discourse, whether in an election year or otherwise, are essential. Americans have a strong interest in supporting democratic movements and respect for human rights around the world because free societies elsewhere contribute to our own security and prosperity here at home. But that interest is undermined when others see how our own house is in disarray. The world will not wait for us to address our problems, so we must continue to strive toward a more perfect union and help those abroad looking for U.S. leadership. Each of us has a role to play and responsibilities to uphold. Our elected officials must lead by example and govern effectively in ways that deliver for the American people. This in turn will help to restore trust in our public service. The rest of us must engage in civil dialogue, respect democratic institutions and rights, and uphold safe, secure, and accessible elections, and contribute to local, state, or national improvement. By signing this statement, we reaffirm our commitment to the principles of democracy, undergirding this great nation, protecting our freedom, and respecting our fellow citizens. When united by these convictions, America is stronger as a country and an inspiration for others. And the following presidential centers signed on to this: the Obama Foundation, the George W. Bush Presidential Center, the Clinton Foundation, the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, the Carter Center, the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, the Richard Nixon Foundation, the LBJ Foundation, the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, the Truman Library Institute, the Roosevelt Institute, and the Hoover Presidential Foundation. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to ask the town manager if there's any additions, deletions, or movements within the agenda.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Like a motion to adopt the agenda as
So moved.
second. Second. A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 5. This is a proclamation recognizing Patriot Day. A few too many papers on my desktop tonight. I'd like to read this proclamation. Whereas the town of Matthews and the citizens of our community join with our fellow Americans across the nation in honoring and remembering those who lost their lives in the horrific terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. And whereas we continue to offer support to the families and friends who lost loved ones in the devastating events of that day, and especially our firefighters, police, and first responders who continue to step forward and serve our communities with dedication and vigilance. And whereas we commend the firefighters, police, and first responders who courageously risk their lives to rescue those in need, as well as the ordinary citizens and volunteers who selflessly gave their lives to aid their friends and coworkers who were injured or trapped in the Twin Towers and Pentagon. And whereas the events of September 11, 2001 tested the strength and resolve of our country, and they also remind us of the values set out by our forefathers who saw a vision for the United States that we would live and be free, and today are even more determined than ever that we will not give in to threats to the safety and security of the United States. And whereas the United States is unified in our purpose to prevent further tragedies like those experienced on September 11, 2001, and it is right to honor the men and women of our armed forces who have fought tirelessly to keep us safe from further attacks on U.S. soil. And whereas today we remember the lives that were lost and honor the heroic actions taken by our first responders and thank the members of our military for their continued service and sacrifice. Now, therefore, I, John F. Higdon, the mayor of the town of Matthews, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim September 11, 2023 as Patriot Day in the town of Matthews and call this day to the attention of all citizens. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the great town of Matthews to be affixed this 11th day of September 2023. And I'd like to present this to our fire chief, Rob Kennenberg. Rob, you want to say a few words?
Caught me off guard. Here we go. On behalf of the men and women of the Matthews Police Department, Matthews Fire and EMS, and Matthews Public Works, who we legitimately consider part of our first responder group, we're honored to serve the town of Matthews. We're honored to be of service to the citizens of the town of Matthews whenever and wherever you need us. We're there for you.
Keep asking them to build that hole in the floor for me, but they haven't done it. We have another proclamation tonight. This is in recognition of National Hispanic Heritage Month. So I'll read this one. Whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month, known as, give it a good shot, Mes de la Enriqueta Hispana, is celebrated nationwide from September 15th through October 15th each year to celebrate the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas the observation started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week and was expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988, September 15th is significant because it is the anniversary of the independence for Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Days on September 16th and 18th, respectively. And whereas Latinos are individuals who are descendants from Latin American countries and may speak a variety of different languages, while Hispanics are individuals who speak Spanish and are descendants from Spanish-speaking countries. And whereas the United States Hispanic population is over 60 million, with over 1 million living in the state of North Carolina and approximately 170,000 in Mecklenburg County. And whereas the town of Matthews values the fact that the American identity derived from a fabric of diverse traditions and stories woven together, and is committed to recognizing Hispanic culture and heritage as an important part of the community. Therefore, I, Mayor John F. Higdon, do hereby proclaim September 15th to October 15th as National Hispanic Heritage Month and call its observance to all residents. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 11th day of September, 2023. We're presenting this to. So Sandra Conway. Would you like to say a few words?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higdon and the Board of Commissioners for this proclamation to highlight National Hispanic Heritage Month. It's important that we come together to appreciate, celebrate, educate, and recognize the contributions and accomplishments of our Hispanic community who are our neighbors. I read an article in Women's Health, yes, downstairs in the library a couple of days ago, that listed the top 13 2023 important National Hispanic Heritage Month facts you should know. I'm not going to list all 13. I'm going to do 3. Top one, U.S. Hispanic population is currently 63.7 million people. Each year, the National Council of Hispanic Employment Program Managers commence an observance theme. This year it is, and I'm going to probably mess it up as well, but Todos somos uno, which says, we are all, we are one. The third one was Hispanic Heritage Month is celebrated nationwide through festivals, parades, art shows, conference, community gatherings, and music. You can join the celebration by coming out to Musica Matthews on October 21st from 5 to 9 at Stumptown. So on behalf of the Cultural Diversity Committee, we encourage each of you to learn something about Hispanic Heritage Month this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Do a photo as well. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. That's our public comment. We do have a few folks that have signed up here tonight. Pamela Mullins, come forward and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Mullins. I live at 909 Evian Lane in Matthews, 28105. I live in the Hampton Green community. First of all, I want to thank you all for serving our community on this town council. We appreciate your service, and I know you put in tireless hours, so thank you for that. Each year, my daughter and grandson anticipate the drive from Fort Mill, South Carolina, to join my husband, David, and myself for the Matthews Alive Parade. We've been doing this for several years now. And after that, we go through the festival. My 7-year-old grandson received a gift of $20 to spend as he wished at the festival, and we were happy to be part of his grand adventure and see what treasures he would buy with his money. The first exhibit that grabbed his attention was a rock and gem shop. He was excited to look at and touch the colorful and cool rock creations. Unfortunately, as my husband, who was also enjoying the shop himself, went to the back of the booth, he was disgusted to see some phallic objects for sale. Quick exit. All right, we moseyed through the other shops without incident. On our way to the children's exhibit, which is in front of the community center, we walked right past, it's either booth 51 or 52, and we saw a sign that said adult content with products that were labeled as FU and now I'm abbreviating those words, so just fill in. I was completely taken by surprise and diverted my grandson's attention. Monday, September the 4th, 2023, I returned to the festival and went to the offensive vendor of 51 or 52. I told the lady that I will complain about her shop to the festival organizers because the merchandise is not appropriate for a family-friendly festival. She was unconcerned and said, "That's okay because the organizers knew about the kinds of products I am selling and they are okay with them. Besides, I have had plenty of sales." So I sent emails to Mayor Higdon, Leanne Moore, the town manager, Ms. Hawks, and then Ms. Hawks forwarded my email to Chris Melton. I appreciate the very quick responses from everyone. Thank you so much. Ms. Hawk and the mayor informed me that the festival is run by a 501c3 organization, but Ms. Hawks said that tax dollars contribute financially as a partner and in kind. So here is the response I received from Chris Melton. I'm not going to read the whole email, but first and foremost, this is from Chris. First and foremost, please accept my sincere apologies on behalf of our organization for any offense or discomfort you may have experienced due to the explicit nature of some vendor goods. I share your sentiments and can assure you that such material and language are not in line with the message, mission, or vision of our festival. I appreciate your proactive approach in bringing this matter to our attention. Rest assured, your concerns were not taken lightly. Our executive director and I promptly approached one of the vendors in question and asked them to cover and conceal the offending products. We also had a candid discussion with other vendors and volunteers about our expectations for maintaining a family-friendly environment at Matthews Alive. To prevent a recurrence of such incidences, we are taking multiple immediate steps to enhance our vendor selection process. In the coming year, our application will include specific language clearly stating that products of explicit nature are not welcome at our event. Vendors will be advised that any violation of this policy will result in their removal from the event. So I am so pleased with his response, but I wonder why this lady vendor told me that the organizers were okay with the products that she was selling. I don't quite understand that. So that's a fuzzy area that I think needs to be addressed. I want to ask if you're okay with the products in these two booths, and will this type of merchandise be allowed in future festivals? If so, I urge you not to allow tax dollars to support this festival, and how can we keep this from happening in the future? Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Next person we have signed up is David Mullins.
David Mullins, 909 Evian Lane. I'd just like to reiterate what my wife said. We've been going a number of years to Matthews Live and always enjoyed it. Matter of fact, I got to see, I think I saw almost all the commissioners up in that parade, and I appreciate y'all's service to our and servanthood to our community very much. I was enamored by the rock thing, and I was about to purchase a solar system collection of marbles for my grandson when I spotted at least 5 statues of the phallic genitalia that Pamela described. And I was really taken back. I just could not, and that was front and center, right in front. It wasn't in the back, it was front and center. And so that was very disturbing to me. And then the other booth, it was, the only thing it had was stickers. And all the stickers had at least 2 cuss words, 2 profane words on every one of them, just different quotes and statements, but they were all very profane. And it was labeled adult content. I just very upset that my grandson started reading them. And I don't want to see that happen again. We have this Matthews Alive is a very wholesome thing. I would ask you, I appreciate what Chris said and what he or she, I don't know what's he or she. Okay, I appreciate what she said and what things would take place, but I'd also ask you to be sure that you set standards for any contributions you do, and also the use of facilities, so that this doesn't occur again. We can bring our kids to a good, safe environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins. You know, we usually don't respond to public comment, but I will say that I have a 30-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old son, and they grew up going to Matthews Alive from a very young age. And I think I speak for everybody on this dais that I don't think any of us find those offensive materials to be appropriate or appropriate for a family-friendly festival like Matthews Alive. And you may or may not know that Mr. Melton, Chris Melton, served on this board. He's a former commissioner. He's a good friend of most of us up here, all of us up here, and I'm sure he will take matters, resolve the situation. You can bet on that. Next person we have signed up is Peter Friedrich.
$2501 Sardis Road. My name is Peter Friedrich. 21 years ago, a paramilitary organization in India called the RSS took to the streets of the Indian state of Gujarat to spend 3 days slaughtering men, women, and children from the Muslim community. And by the time the carnage subsided, approximately 2,000 Muslims lay dead. You will, I hope, be shocked to learn that the RSS paramilitary, which perpetrated that atrocity, has a direct connection to the town of Matthews here in North Carolina. That pogrom in Gujarat, India, was overseen by a brand new head of the state, a lifelong member of the RSS named Narendra Modi. Perpetrators of the pogrom, survivors, whistleblowers from Modi's regime, Indian human rights investigators, and international human rights organizations all corroborated each other on a couple of major points. First, this paramilitary, the RSS, was behind the violence, and second, Modi himself allowed at best or orchestrated at worst the massacre. So right now, you are probably scratching your heads and wondering how all of this connects to Matthews. Well, during the 2002 Gujarat pogrom, RSS-linked killers who took to the streets infamously raised the refrain, "The police are with us." Graffiti claiming the same was scrawled in targeted neighborhoods, and surviving eyewitnesses have testified how police under Modi's control either stood back and passively permitted the bloodshed at best, or actively joined the mobs in their butchery at worst. And this was not the only anti-minority massacre committed by the RSS in the 21st century, nor the only one in which police were openly complicit. So here now is the relevance of all of this to Matthews. The RSS paramilitary in India has an international wing called the HSS. The HSS in America serves as a support base and propaganda mouthpiece for the RSS to such an extent that when Modi, who was then known as the Butcher of Gujarat and banned from this country, ran for Prime Minister of India, HSS leaders here in America worked to help get him elected. Meanwhile, the town of Matthews has repeatedly engaged with the HSS, presumably out of innocent ignorance. Mayor Higdon in March of this year reported meeting with the HSS and called them very nice. Last year, the Matthews Police Department welcomed a huge contingent of uniformed HSS members to celebrate a festival and do a photo op. And in 2021, the town passed a proclamation applauding the HSS. Now, pardon me, I do not mean to sound impudent, but in all of these years of engaging with the HSS, did anyone on the board here ever take just a few seconds and actually Google the group? Seriously, have any of you done that? I have. On the very first page of results, it says that HSS's parent organization is the RSS. Well, then what happens if I Google the RSS? The first result says that the RSS is an Indian far-right Hindu nationalist volunteer paramilitary organization. Shouldn't it be a little concerning that the town is platforming and praising an affiliate of a far-right paramilitary in India? Shouldn't it also be a little concerning that the town is apparently doing this without even bothering to check out the background of the organization before engaging with it? North Carolina is home to many Indian Americans from religious minority backgrounds back in India, people whose families are currently facing persecution by the RSS and its figurehead Modi. We have here, I have here, gentlemen who have joined me, residents of the Charlotte area, Mr. Elias Muhammad, Mr. Farhan Syed. Mr. Elias Muhammad is the president of the Indian American Muslim Council Charlotte chapter, and both Indian origin Muslims. Well, remember how I told you that the RSS in India chanted, "The police are with us," while murdering Muslims back in Gujarat, the Indian state of Gujarat? Then how do you think it makes Indian American Muslims in this area feel, for instance, when they see the Matthews Police Department embracing the HSS, which is the US or the international wing of that RSS paramilitary back in India? I ask you, what excuse other than ignorance does Matthews have for giving space to the HSS, to the international wing of a violent fascist paramilitary like the RSS? And if it's an issue of lack of knowledge, I have here for each member of the board a short info packet about the RSS and its ties to the HSS, and I will follow up with more detailed information via email within the next day. And I would recommend you also reach out to people like Mr. Elias Muhammad of IEMC Charlotte to discuss this issue, which is of deep concern to him and the Indian American Muslim community and other Indian Americans in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedrich. Would anybody else that's in the room tonight here like to speak? Mr. Young?
George Young, 407 Pinecrest Drive, Matthews, North Carolina. Welcome, Mayor and Town Commissioners. I saw on the agenda tonight there is on new business, the aspect of wanting to purchase a particular piece of property. My concern I've got, and it is located at 251 South Trade Street. That's right next to our elementary school. Apparently we're looking at paying $500,000 for it. One interesting thing is you want to hit the tourism budget for it. That sort of stands out a little bit at $500,000. I don't know if that's also connected to the stream of money come in, but we just did a bond measure. I'll be thinking parks would probably be the hit for that. I'm not sure. The other issue is that there's a remark in here that says it's these costs are tourism fund eligible because the property is intended for future use as the town's signature special event space downtown and would allow for more larger tourism related events. I assume that's Matthews Live that we just had. I took my kids there years ago when they're much smaller. It's a wonderful thing that we do. But there's also a remark in here that starts to go in the idea of potential future relocation of Stumpton Park and Matthews Veterans Memorial Park. Now, I've heard rumors that CMS may, for instance, bulldoze Matthews Elementary, move it to another location, that land and all the land that happens to exist behind it would essentially become a park, and that Stumpton Park would be potentially then sold to developers. Now, I don't ever remember having a bunch of citizen input meetings that we've done on like the downtown signature that we've got. There's decades that have been put into that park, going back to Lee Myers. And I'll be blunt, I don't see that as occurred. I have a concern with that. Second part is the idea of selling parkland to put development in. We're going to have what, 4-story condos? Many of you ran on a platform against a parcel 2 parcels over because of a developer. And the people that were on the board got very large checks, including the mayor at the time. And this is just a little weird. It looks like, you know, we're going to down the road sell our main park to developers and move the park behind the community center, which, by the way, I've actually been back there. It's semi-swamp, doesn't drain real well. So I know developers can fix that, but it just sort of, I don't see the public discussion that's happened on this. I do believe that if you buy that property, you would get your money back. I don't see, it's almost 2/3 of an acre right in our downtown. Chances are someone's going to want to, if you do sell it, one of the problems going to have is a lot of property is sold on what's called contingencies, where they're going to want to come to you with higher density. There's a conflict of interest with the board and the town. You'd have to sell it as is with no guarantee on rezoning. But you'd probably still get your $500,000 back. I am a big supporter of parks. I ran for office years ago, and that was one thing I said was parks. I met a guy named Mr. Purser years ago. Town of Matthews a long time ago condemned his property. I had a discussion with him, but his park is named after him, which is good. But you guys need to slow down on this, and you need to have some public hearings, bluntly, on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And just for the knowledge of the public, we haven't voted or agreed to move any park, but the idea would be replacing Stumptown Park, which is approximately 2.7 acres, with a minimum 7 or 8 acres space, which would be, we're really have outgrown Stumptown Park. A lot of the concerts and things we have there, it's shoulder to shoulder. You can't move. It's not big enough. So we need a bigger space. So it wouldn't be eliminating a park, but rather replacing it with a much larger park, 2 or 3 or 4 times larger. So, but we haven't agreed to do anything yet. So that's still in the planning phases. Would anybody else in the room care to speak tonight on anything? We have a few folks pre-registered. Maureen, Josh Greco, Charlotte Street Hockey League via Zoom.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Um,
Can you hear me okay?
We're working on your sound levels. They're a little low right now, so hold on, please.
Okay, can you try it again now, Josh?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, much better.
Right. Josh Greco, 2729 Carriage Crossing. I serve as the president and CEO on the board of directors for the Charlotte Street Hockey League, aka CSHL, along with 9 other board members. And I thank you for the brief few minutes to address the board and the Matthews community this evening. For those not familiar with hockey, or for those that might be familiar with ice hockey that you see on TV, our sport is called ball hockey or deck hockey. And it serves as a more inclusive and more cost-effective means to engage with the sport. Our group has been playing in Charlotte and neighboring communities like Huntersville and Ballantyne since 2010. We started with an adult program because adults are the ones capable enough to coordinate events. But soon enough, we had so much interest from parents about a youth program that we launched CSHL Youth Hockey a couple of years ago. We have a diverse and large group of volunteers that run pickup events, entry-level clinics, and even league play and tournaments. At this time, we are a self-sustaining organization and require no outside assistance to run our program. We were officially established as a nonprofit 501c3 in 2019, and our mission is twofold. One, to raise awareness and provide access to this great game of hockey we all love so much. And two, to be involved in our communities, to give our time, effort, and resources to raise money and awareness for community causes that align with our values. At this time, 10 years into our program and 4 years of being a nonprofit, we are in search of a more permanent home. My goal tonight is to put CSHL on the map and Matthews, as the Park and Rec Department begin to formulate their master plan for the next 10 years. We have a community list in and around North and South Charlotte of 800 people that receive weekly communication for either our adult program, our youth program, or both. And we receive anywhere between 2 and 5 emails on a weekly basis asking questions about our program and asking to be added to our weekly communication by way of our newsletters. We currently play on tennis courts or facilities that we can rent that is just enough conducive to our game. What started as a fun way to get together and enjoy our sport has grown past what the facilities we rent out are capable of accommodating. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we are outgrowing our home. Tennis courts and rented facilities have become no longer feasible for our growing program. What we are asking for is a partnership and a place to play, a partner that will help us build the rinks we need to accommodate for our players. And before I jump to conclusions or assume what the benefits would be for Matthews, I'd like to spend, or it's my intentions or our intentions to spend the next few months understanding and getting to know the Matthews Park's needs for how our partnership would align with the Matthews community's goals. No one is doing what we're doing, at least in the sport of hockey. And you may say that hockey doesn't belong in the South or isn't ready for it yet. But as a transplant from Buffalo, New York, that moved to Charlotte over 10 years ago, I've seen how many people have moved here from hockey cities and are interested in playing the game. There are no places to play. We have a group of over 800 adults and youth that would flock to Matthews if our beloved sport is accommodated in the form of helping us build rinks. We survive off of donated equipment that come in the form of shin guards, helmets, sticks, etc. So we can offer everything a child needs to come out and try the game with us for free. And our kids in our program range from the ages of 4 to 15 and vary in skill levels from first timers to experienced tournament goers that travel the country. We also offer the unique experience of using hockey to instill core values in our kids. Before every event, we say that we surf, S-U-R-F. And of course, each letter stands for something. The S stands for safety. We want to promote safety with our kids who are coming out and trying hockey for the first time, making sure they have proper equipment, making sure they know how to handle sticks, bumping into other children. The U stands for unity. We identify what we're all united about. Of course, the game of hockey is why we all come together, but there's other reasons. The R stands for respect. We've had several moments where there's altercations or bumping into each other as with any sport. And we use that opportunity to bring the kids together and reinforce the value of respect. I actually just was shared a story the other day of a youth soccer program where the game was so physical that the kids refused to shake hands afterwards. It just irks me a bit because we view our responsibility not just putting on the sport and playing, but instilling these values as well. And of course, last but not least, the F in surf stands for fun. It's happened from time to time where a kid is just out there because a parent would like them to be, and we can tell they're not having fun. So we use every opportunity to reinforce our intentions for fun, and we include that kid or child into having some fun, some way, shape, or form. We'd just like to share our group will be attending and raising money and awareness for the upcoming charity softball game for the Matthews Help Center on September 30th. We attended Matthews Beach Fest back in May. We were the ones at the end of the street with a mini net and hockey sticks, and we met several of you. And we had a lot of kids try out a shot on the net and just having fun at the end of the street there. So we gave away a lot of flyers and raised awareness for our program there and had a great showing. And I guess what I'd like to say is that we'd just like to be considered for this master plan that's taking place over the next 12 months to accommodate our needs. And on behalf of the Charlotte Street Hockey League, we really look forward to making more and more connections in the Matthews community and are excited at the potential of a long-term partnership and permanent home for the Charlotte Street Hockey League.
Thank you,
all.
Greco. While you were speaking, I briefly asked our town manager if it would be appropriate for you to meet with our Parks and Rec Director, Corey King, and she said yes, that would be fine. So I would suggest that might be a next step, if you haven't already, to speak to him, and his contact information is on the Matthews website.
Thank you very much. I have spoken with him, and we already have a next time scheduled. So we're going in the right direction, it sounds like.
You're way ahead of me then. Very good.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Lori, I understand you have a letter from Jim Dedman that would you like to read to the record?
Yes, Mr. Dedman lives at 1330 Golden Hill Road, and he writes, Agenda item 12B shows that manager Becky Hawk proposes plans to pay in cash land between Commissioner Mark Tofano's home and Matthews Elementary. The funds will come from the tourism budget for parkland, even though there are no public plans for such at this time. Perhaps this board assumes that the CMS bonds will be passed by taxpayers and that the school will be moved to the rear of the property or McKee Road in Pleasant Plains, as the mayor has hinted to, and that Stumptown Park will be moved across the street in the space vacated by Matthews Elementary and the newly purchased property. That way, the charm of small town Matthews will allow developers to build a high-density housing project in Stumptown's place. But I have a feeling this will go further by offering Mr. Tofano and Gary Wright, who owns a controversial property on the other side of Mr. Tofano, a deal on their property. We recall that Smith's zoning met opposition and media attention when commissioners zoned the property for 13 large homes on land meant for 4. And if Mr. Tofano refuses to sell his property to the town, perhaps Mayor Higdon and company will then condemn his property under the auspices of eminent domain, just as has been done to the former owners of Purser Halsey Park. That was a situation where the town took advantage of an elderly World War II veteran. It is obvious to anyone watching the proceedings of commissioners over the past year, one can sense the desire to censor Mr. Tofano since he has objected to some of their spending of taxpayer dollars. For example, the slide presentation given by Renee Garner that was an outright insult to Mr. Tofano's character and integrity was allowed to be presented while Mayor Higdon sat idly by and watched. Or instruction by Mayor Higdon to Clerk Lori Canapino to exclude Commissioner Hoover and Tofano for meetings with local business owners during the bonds push. I find it interesting that $500,000 is so easily recommended to be spent when we just witnessed multiple sessions of attempted nickel and diming of the new Fire Station 3, wherein seemingly every item was under scrutiny that was to be spent for a project that involves the public safety. How does this mayor and board put additional parks above the safety of the citizens of this town? Recently, the ARPA funds that Mr. Higdon said at the first bond meeting were needed to be used to build the station have been thrown about as a source of payment for other important projects. Tell me what important projects trump fire safety, a seemingly overpriced video purchase that has mostly been spoken about in regards to the commissioner chambers only? How many companies and which ones bid on this equipment to come up with this additional cost? While I'm certain this theory may bring some eye rolling on the part of Mr. Higdon, McCool, Garner, Urban, Whitley, let's not forget that they did the same thing when asked about taking $250,000 of the $1 million given to the town by Erickson Properties and spent on the other side of town where it would have no benefit to the retirees at Windsor Run.
All right. Maureen, do we have anybody else online that's indicated they'd like to make a public comment? All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, recess our regular meeting for public hearings and applications to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and Land Use Map of the Town of Matthews. Entertain such a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Public hearings will be held until 10 p.m. If any public hearing is not open by then, it will be continued to October 9th, 2023. I'd like to start by asking Mr. Camp to introduce the planning board members in attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and board. Good evening. Here on our first row, we have Doug Rose, our chair, Jim Johnson, our youth voice, Julia Sadowski. Our second row, Jonathan Clayton, our vice chair, Howie Labner, Chris Huzar, and Bob Jackson. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Remind everyone that you can speak once during a public hearing. People may speak at public hearing items once during the hearing. If you wish to speak tonight and the public hearing is continued, you will not be able to speak at the continued public hearing date. Our first item is zoning application 2022-759 Midfield Station. to change the zoning classification from R15 to ENT on that certain 66.85 acre site south of the Matthews Mint Hill Road and north of the Sportsplex, seeking mixed-use development consisting of multi-family units, single-family attached units, and non-residential uses, and being further designated as tax parcels 215-081-13 and 215-081-33. This was continued from August 14th. Jay.
All right, so be prepared for a little bit of deja vu. Not only am I pinch hitting once again for Darren, we also have a continuation. As I spoke about last month, this is a very complex project. Not only is a large rezoning by Matthews standards, we are attempting to weave a very complex mixed-use development into the neighborhood and with the existing Briley development. So conversations regarding the TIA, Charlotte Area Transit, and various other items continue in the background. Developer did hold their community meeting for the additional parcel that was added last month. And if it's the board's pleasure, I'd like to invite John Carmichael up. I'd like to give you just a brief summary of where the developer stands on the project.
Thank you, Jay.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, members of the planning board. I'll be really brief. You continued it last month. We appreciate that. A parcel was added to the rezoning request. We had another neighborhood meeting, as Mr. Kemp said, on August 22nd. We had two attendees, Tiffany Smith from the Crestdale community, who's on their board, and Mr. Meyer of Elevation Church. I think it was a very positive meeting, and I feel like the project was generally well received. We do have further work to do with CATS, the TIA, and working with staff through some issues. This is a complicated project, and we really want to make sure we get it right as we move forward. And we appreciate your patience and Jay and Darren's efforts thus far. Happy to answer your question. Mr. Dixon and Ms. Peterson with Prophet Dixon are here if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Carmichael? Entertain a motion to continue.
I'll go ahead and make that motion and we continue the public hearing to October 9th, 2023 per the memo dated August 14th, 23 by Darren Hallman, our planner. And that's
Second.
for application 22759.
Motion by Commissioner Urban, second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Now entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? Now stand at our regular meeting, and we'll move on to planning and development business. First, we'll have the planning board report from Chair Jim Johnson.
Good evening, board. I've got a report from the August 22nd meeting of the planning board. We had 3 items for action tonight. The first one is zoning petition 2022-772 NAI Southern Real Estate to change conditions on certain zoning districts designated O and B1SCD on certain property designated as 1640 Matthews Township Parkway and further designated as tax parcel 193291-45. The members of the planning board reviewed the changes, of which there were a lot. They had made a lot of changes in about a week. And we basically liked what they had done with the additional tree save and the parking lot changes, the landscaping, everything, the conditional notes. So we voted unanimously to recommend approval, subject to the requirement that the future elevations be submitted to the Board of Commissioners for review and their approval, and the development notes be clarified further. The zoning application was found to be consistent with the land use plan because it proposes a medical office adjacent to the hospital property and retail and financial uses along the frontage of Matthews Township Parkway. The zoning application was reasonable in that it creates new non-residential uses within the Matthews Township Parkway corridor. The second item we had is zoning petition 2023-776 RE assets to change the zoning classification from R20 to B1CD on certain property designated as 2025 Matthews Mill Hill Road and further designated as tax parcel 193-311-14. The planning board reviewed the change in zoning and discussions were had regarding the sidewalk size and the locations of the sidewalk and the landscaping buffers between the sidewalk and the project, as well as the structure height. The recommendation from the developer was to not put in a wide 10-foot sidewalk, but to try to utilize a 5-foot sidewalk and allow more buffering to be preserved between the sidewalk and the building. Some of the discussion about the building height was regarding the tree size. There's 30 and 40-foot trees in front of it, but they're all those scrubby pines, so there's not a lot of shelter underneath them. And the developer is putting in some evergreen like cypress, or I'm sorry, lelands that would be covering the lower sections. We decided as a board that they had made enough changes. There really wasn't any way for them to do the connectivity, which we were hopeful for back with there's a private road and a development that was done back, I guess, before we decided to encourage connectivity, because we allowed them to build a project with no connectivity and no support for it. So that's really not the developer's issue to resolve at this point. So after that, we did get a motion to deny it, but the board decided instead that they would go ahead and forward approval, and the vote was 5-2. And Mr. Labner and Mr. Clayton voted against it. But the rest of the board felt that it was reasonable and that it creates a new non-residential use within the Matthews Township Parkway corridor, and it was consistent with the land use plan because it proposes medical and general office within the Matthews Township Parkway corridor. The final thing we had for you tonight is zoning application 2023-780. It was a text amendment to change the text of the town code regarding accessory structures and recreational uses in or adjacent to residential settings to allow accessory structures in the front setback in the RI district under specific conditions, and to allow pools and pool houses in the RI district under certain conditions. The planning board reviewed the 4 properties around Matthews that this could apply to, that were all zoned in a way that this could be utilized. We voted unanimously to recommend approval, subject to text being updated to allow for a 6-foot opaque masonry or similar wall. The zoning motion was found to be consistent with the land use plan because it allows for very limited encroachment of the front yard setback and still preserves the intent of that setback. The request was found to be reasonable in that it provided the opportunity for an accessory use that will be complementary to conditionally approved projects. I think the main goal was to make sure that the traffic noise and pollution was separated from the pool, and that there was no way that the public right-of-way could see into the pool area. So as long as that is met within the text, we were pretty pro letting that go. So are there any questions?
Any questions, Commissioner Urban?
So just to be clear on the one with the medical office building next to Novant, you said you wanted elevations to be brought back, and the petitioner's notes say that the 2 smaller buildings were being brought back. So is that what your motion was related to, or was your motion that you wanted all elevations to be brought back?
My understanding was that we were talking about all the buildings. I did not feel like the separating the 2 out of there, although the 2 in front are pretty much undefined right now, a lot less than the primary building. So, I think you're already really approving the current elevation of that building because it's pretty much in their application right now.
Okay. And then just a follow-up on the 776, which is the building on the Parkway corridor. That seemed to be a very good debate. So, and obviously the meeting minutes don't reflect everything. So could I have, from the pro side and the con side, maybe a little bit more elaboration on why they voted for or against?
With the staff recommended that we push back and deny it just because it was a little ill-defined about the building height, and because the building is sort of in a key area, that it could be a gateway into town if it were visible. But what we decided was that based on their changes to the sidewalk, their changes to the vegetation, trying to figure out a way to increase the amount of buffering that's going to be there that would be beyond what the code would be, that building would be pretty much hidden. I don't think you'll see very much of that building. So I don't think it's going to be a giant eyesore when you come around that corner. So I think that was the debate. And I guess there's some subjectivity, and whether that's a true statement or not.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Johnson? Commissioner Garner.
I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Johnson, but when we discussed it, we discussed that item number 3 as being isolated down to one specific property. Was there a reason? I guess you guys discussed 4. I was under the impression that the language was specific enough that it kind of isolated it.
I don't think it is. I think any RI, currently zoned RI, could be look at this language and try to utilize a pool or an accessory building in their front setback. And so, I mean, one of the ones we looked at was Liberty over there off of Moore Road, and I'm sure Erickson and Axe would also potentially, but they would have to come back, I would imagine, to the board to get something like that approved. But no one really sees that actually being a likelihood for those projects either. So,
Jay, can you confirm that? Not that I doubt, Mr. Johnson, but just to make sure.
So the way the language is written, it would be codified in the UDO, but since these are conditional plans, anything that's RICD, an amendment to that plan would still have to come back to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Should know to never question your your correctness. All right, are there any other further questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on to our business. The first one is zoning application 2022-772 NAI Southern RE to change the conditions on those certain zoning districts designated as OCD and B1 SCD on that certain property designated as 1640 Matthews Township Parkway and further designated as tax parcel 193-29145. Mr. Will.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Good to see everyone this evening. So this is our, the NAI Southern Real Estate is the applicant. They're requesting a change in conditions at 1640 Matthews Township Parkway. It's currently split zoned. It's B1 SCD on the parkway, and then the majority of the parcel is then zoned OCD office. The applicant proposes development of 50,000 square foot medical office building, 4,000 square feet of a financial services building, and 5,100 square feet of retail and associated parking. Based on issues that were raised by staff and at the public hearing, the petitioner had submitted an updated site plan with building elevations for the medical office, not for the 2 buildings up front. Those are proposed to come back before the board for future elevation approval. Staff continues to have a concern over the vehicular stub to the western property line, which is the property line adjacent to the Novant property. As is currently shown, the dumpster serving the medical office building will have to be relocated for this stub connection to be made. Staff feels that this connection is very important for the future connectivity, even if currently if the property owners aren't interested in doing it right now, we're interested in planning for the future. The staff does recommend motion to approve with a number of conditions. Approval of the TIA is a condition. Moving the medical office building dumpster to complete the vehicular stub to the western property line is a condition. And providing a cross-access agreement for future connectivity is a condition that staff recommends. And let me see if I'm going to zoom to see if we've got the site plan up here. Yeah, just to where the connection. This is the connection in question. A dumpster corral here with a note that says future connection to adjacent property. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also here to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Rob, why is it that we seem to be getting so many of these petitions that still don't have the TIA completed?
Well, I'll be honest, we're still working through our process of how rezoning works through the process and in conjunction with the TIA. So and apologies for that. We're getting better at it.
Well, I understand in this case, they agree to undertake any mitigation that's required, but it's a little stressful for those of us that sit up here as elected officials to vote for something that we don't know what the traffic impact is. That's a little hairy. Commissioner Hoover.
I wonder if you could help me clarify something. And according to the information I have received, this property is recorded with the NCDEQ as brownfield property. And if that's the case, then there's an issue here. And I don't know if if they're part of the brownfield program to get this property cleaned up. If in fact this is true, it's listed as that. We know, and I do have concerns as well. You know, the Harris Teeter property that connects to it, that's also a brownfield. And, you know, I do have concerns. Can any contamination go into that property? You know, have that concern. I don't know if there's been an environmental site assessment on this property yet because of this. I don't know if that's something that needs to be done. You know, I don't know much about, you know, getting into the environmental issues. So for me, I don't have a problem with the project. I just have these concerns because we've got to make sure this property is not contaminated before you start turning all that stuff up.
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner Hoover. It is my understanding that the property to the south of this property is on the brownfield list. I was not aware that this property is on that list. It has never been developed. And so I would, unless it was used as a landfill or something like that, way a long time ago, I don't know.
I don't either. I just know it's on there and it says it's listed as a brownfield site with the NCDEQ brownfield site recorded. That's all I can tell you. So I don't know. So for me, that's an issue and I feel that needs to be clarified. We need to get that under control before we even move forward with this. That's just me.
Commissioner Urban.
So that's an EPA level 1 and an EPA level 2 assessment. Those are the two you would factor in. But obviously that's on the individuals purchasing the property and that should be their due diligence from that aspect of it. And then if all of a sudden something does pop up on the radar, they're liable to mitigate that to the full extent of the law and the handling. So I think that could be remedied. They would have to meet the criteria based on those in the state. But good question. So Rob, there was this disconnect between planning board that said, we want to see all elevations. Petitioner seeing the 2 out parcel elevations. Where is staff sitting on that?
Great question. Well, if you'll recall back at the public hearing, that was the first time we saw elevations for the main medical office building.
Mm-hmm.
We have not seen elevations for the 2 retail or the 2 buildings to the Matthews Township Parkway side. So that is in their notes and staff concurs that those elevations should be brought back in front of the board.
Okay.
Now we did, this was the first time that the planning board had seen the medical office elevations. They were concerned, I think, and rightfully so, that was the first time they had seen them. And they wanted to have it maybe more time to look at the elevations for the main office building. And I think that's something that has been consistent with this board is not wanting to see an elevation the night of approval or something like that. So,
but in our process, though, the ship has sailed on the planning board to make comment on the elevations now. I mean, it's any revisions, or whatever, they've made a comment. That's one issue. I've seen the petitioners made changes and things of that nature, but to Commissioner Hoover's point, to the mayor's point on the TIA, I suppose it's possible in the TIA, something comes up that makes something move 10 or 15 feet, which completely upsets the apple cart on how the site plan is developed or driveway access is made or the road or physical buildings are constructed. Is that not an accurate statement?
In the TIA,
I mean, I guess that.
In the TIA, probably not, sir.
Probably not.
Probably not, just because the improvements that are recommended are along Matthews Township Parkway, not interior to the site itself.
So you don't think any increased depth, setback of the building, curb cuts, site triangle radiuses or anything like that might not affect anything?
Those have mostly been worked out. Okay. And we just have not finalized the TIA.
I mean, there's the project's moving in the right direction. I like your point about the easement connection. The question is where would you put the dumpster enclosure? And then when would Novant acquiesce to having the connection? But I think to the mayor's point, and I've said this many times, is we seem to have a lot of boxes unchecked and we're taking it on faith that we'll get through it. And we end up with these gotcha moments. And it's not necessarily the petitioner's fault. It's just the system sort of enables us to sort of plod through, oh, well, the TIA hasn't been completed and we didn't quite do this, quite do that. And 4 years later, we're all going, well, did we really vote on that? So I'm just curious from a sort of high level discussion about this project, when we might expect to see a TIA and the timing of this thing to sort of fill in the gaps, and answer some of the questions about the level 1, the level 2 and stuff of that nature.
Well, we recently have received version 2 of the TIA.
Okay.
So that will be under staff review. I don't have a time frame for you for that.
So you don't know if that's a 30-day window or a 2-month window or?
I think a 30-day window is fair.
Okay.
Fair.
And then my last item, and I'm not necessarily picking on this petition, but hey, I'm picking on it a little bit. Normally I see a pretty full-blown set of development notes. This one came in very weak on development notes. I see more and more related to the architectural standards. Do you feel that this rises to the level of the development notes in terms of how we've done in the past and sort of outlining a project and the wheres and wherefore outs and the dottings of the I's and the T's?
I think it's adequate. I don't think it's one of the better ones that we've seen.
Have you offered suggestions beyond these development notes?
A few, but probably not as extensive as some of the other projects that this board has seen.
And where were you on March 31st, 2008? No. Thank you, Rob. You've stood up to the test very well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Garner.
Not to drill in on this TIA thing, but also to drill in on it a little bit. When you say that it needs approval, are you saying staff approval?
Yes.
Contingent?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think as a board, we generally rely on staff expertise. But in this case, I think it would be important for us to see that before we as a board move forward and approve or not approve this project.
Care to comment?
I see you looking at me and you're looking at him. And anyway, yes, we will be working through the TIA approval process. And I think that, as I sort of mentioned before, we're getting better at it, but we're not there yet. So I apologize for that. And if it's the pleasure of the board, it sounds like there are some boxes that have maybe not have been checked or something like that. I mean, it's always the pleasure of the board to continue a decision if you so desire.
Mr. Garner.
I guess I was leading in that direction with the board, but I'm also curious if the petitioner is here, if they could address any concerns about the brownfield, because I don't think it's quite as simple as turning over soil. There are grants in place that may help their financing. There are so many different elements in place that we are not the experts on that subject, and they probably have better insight.
Ms. Lenz, do you want to address?
Good evening, Commissioners. Brittany Lenz, representing the petitioner. So if this site is being coordinated with NCDEQ through the Brownfields program because of those surrounding sites that do have contamination, they've gone through a phase 2, which is that second level, as Commissioner Urban had discussed. They've gone through the phase 2 and it's come back clean from what I've heard. And I'm not their environmental representation, but it has come back clean from what I understand. And they are continuing to coordinate with NCDEQ to make sure that through the Brownfields program, everything is tested and mitigated if needed. But that is certainly something that they have addressed and are continue to address to the state standards.
Commissioner Hoover.
Can all that information be provided to the board so we can go through it?
Yes, of course. And it is public record as well. So happy to share it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So just for clarity's sake, it was on the brownfield list because of the adjacent properties and not anything on the property itself. Is that correct?
I'm getting a shake of the petitioner's head. Again, I'm not the environmental representation, but that is my understanding as well.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions for either Rob or the applicant? Commissioner Urban.
We planning staff is talking about the dumpster and the vehicular stub to western property line. Of course, we know Novant would probably hold out and resist, but we don't know that's forever. What would be your plan B? I mean, where else could you put a dumpster enclosure? Because it's just words on paper. Yeah, we want to do the connection. We put a barricade, can't drive through, but where would you plan to put a dumpster enclosure that doesn't upset the apple cart to the point where the site plan doesn't work any longer?
Sure. And I have a presentation. I don't need to go through all of it. I do have a slide on it, or if you just want to talk through it, that works too. We'll just talk through it.
The back pocket solution.
So I'm Matt Langston with Landworks Design Group. One of the reasons why we've sort of been pushing back gently on the dumpster location, our plan B, if this thing gets connected through, we can put the dumpsters in an angled position, slide the walk over just a little bit. But one of the things that happens when we do this is this dead end parking area gets too long for fire. And so then you end up having to have a 3-point fire truck turn, which will eat into our parking, which we're right at the code requirement for, and it'll lead into our tree save, which we're right at the code requirement for. And so we're hoping that by, showing the intent of the connection, that, completing it all the way to the property line throws the site plan out of compliance more than we feel like it's worth doing right now. So that's why we're sort of pushing back a little bit on it.
I was just wondering if there's any wording in such that should that connection be made, that takes priority and the dumpster has to get relocated and you just have to address it. Something to that effect that we don't, it's there, everybody gets used to it being there and that's the end of the game. And maybe Chief K's got a thought to how I can get my fire truck down there and bend the rule a little bit, add an extra island or something like that. What do you think, Chief? They're spoken like a true politician.
And I do just want to point out, we, in our note, say that we acknowledge that the dumpster relocation would occur as part of that future connection.
Okay.
And also just want to acknowledge that continued discussions with Novant, they continue to be concerned about that connection for safety and security reasons and very much do not want it at this time, but understand reserving it for the future while still not eroding the rest of the site plan that we worked hard to get those extra tree islands and tree screening in response to the public hearing. So we felt that was a more important focus for this site, knowing that the Novant connection may never be made, but the trees would be put in day one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So other than the TIA conversation, I will throw in one comment about the elevations. I'm sure you're fully intending to go with the elevation of the MOB and then do the architectural requirements later for the two smaller buildings.
Yes, that is our intent, that the medical office building, those elevations are pretty fully baked. Truthfully, those are pretty detailed. I don't know that there'd be more to add.
I will say you've made improvements on it. It's hard to tell. I'm trying to zoom in, look at the windows and how they're divided and all that kind of stuff. And I do like to get fussy about that from a scale standpoint, but your use of the materials, cast stone, maybe if you just stick to cast stone period and not precast concrete, I'd be more amenable. And the brick and the detailing are better than average. And so maybe that would give the board some comfort that I've kind of looked at it from that aspect of it. And it is that it's in a secondary position. So you have to be on site to see it. So if the mayor felt it was kind of meh, it's not as bad as those two that are sitting out on the highway.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
First, I just wanted to speak on the TIA. I think myself, and I think it's going this way. I don't feel comfortable even voting on this till we have the board has seen it. And second, I have a question for the parking. Rob, it seems like a lot of parking. And we've had this conversation in the past where you have these just giant swaths of asphalt. And it almost, when I sprained my ankle earlier this year, I went to the Ortho Carolina in Matthews, and they had a similar parking, and it's empty all the time. So why is this the exact requirement? Is this more than the requirement? What does that look like?
It's a great question, Mayor Pro Tem. They are maybe, I think it's one parking space over the required. So our requirement is just very high for medical office. It's 1 per 300 square feet, I believe is the number. So that's definitely something we can look at revising.
Well, I guess that gets my second point is like, if you could replace some of these parking spots, you could solve the stub out and then the garbage problem. I mean, it just, every time I go to a medical office building like this, there's a huge swath of parking and it is always empty. I don't know if anyone can else attest to that. And it seems excessive in my opinion. So maybe that's a compromise on this or something we can work on.
But this is required in our UDO.
And we need to revisit. I think we need to revisit that because I think it seems excessive.
I think it really depends on what the office is, because my primary physician is with First Charlotte Physicians across the street, and that's parking lot similarly sized, and it's hard to find a parking space. It's always full. So, so it's different. But I know what you're talking about. It just depends on what goes there. But the space directly across the street.
I'm also not saying cut it in half. Like, if we can take away 5 spaces, so we can appease both for the garbage and the
Mr. Urban.
I think, Ken, you're going to have follow-up conversations with the medical providers because they normally want more cars per 1,000 square feet, and our ordinances reflect that. And they absolutely have apoplexy, I guess, in those occasions. Like you mentioned, it fills up. But I feel your pain too. But they did, I will tell you, I mean, I see more trees in the island areas than before. Is it as much as I'd wanted? No, not necessarily, but I do see that infilling and getting a little bit stronger canopy going and stuff like that. And you are one that has provided those parking, I don't know what you call them, like parking collectors. You park your car, you get on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk takes you to the building. You're not walking behind vehicles. So, you're commended for doing that. And maybe it's a discussion about the landscaping attributes and things of that nature. The way I'm sensing the board thought process is here is we haven't dotted all the I's. And if the TIA is the only thing that's outstanding, that's fine. But everything else to me is okay at this stage.
Would I be able to make one comment to that, if I may? So we do have Randy Goddard here with Design Resource Group, our traffic engineer. I don't know if it would be helpful to the board to hear kind of how far along we are with the traffic study, how confident we are in what the mitigation is at this stage, or if this is more of a procedural needing the stamp of approval.
Sure,
on the
Mr.
TIA.
Goddard, if you want to come forward. Rob said something that made me feel a little better. He said he didn't think that the TIA would significantly impact the fit, form, or function of the rest of the developments. That makes me feel a little better. However, this is kind of a disturbing trend that so many of these don't have the TIA. But maybe, Mr. Goddard, you can tell us, do you think an updated TIA could have the potential to significantly impact what's been proposed here?
So again, Randy Goddard, Design Resource Group. From the traffic study standpoint, there was no offsite mitigation required whatsoever. NCDOT's looked at this. The only comment was related to, we have a left turn coming in, a median opening, and that it would require the state's final approval. But we got a left in and the right turn lane is the only mitigation. The other offsite intersections, there's no mitigation. So nothing's moving here. The driveway exists now. There's no additional driveways. It's being widened to accommodate a median to make sure we get the internal protected stem. And that's literally the only comments. The other things related to the traffic study were not mitigation access related. It was more kind of items on the multimodal and some of those items. And NCDOT has signed off and said they agree with the left end and we have the right turn lane. So there's nothing other than what you see right there from a mitigation standpoint. So nothing changes, nothing will change unless buildings are modified or something else. But from an access standpoint, there's nothing being added and it's shown exactly what's on this plan.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Any further questions for Mr. Goddard? Any motions? Commissioner Urban?
Does anybody else on the board, Larry, any comments that may raise? You're a happy camper. All right, well, I think we'll take it on staff's recommendation and then Mr. Goddard's conversation about that. I find that the driveway to the new building kind of a little wonky, but I mean, you're doing the best you can. I can see some confusion going on there, but it's kind of created a nice little divided in and out. So it's kind of cleaned it up a little bit. That's the oncology building, right? Correct. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I like to go ahead. I think we have everything covered. I would say the dumpster enclosure and vehicular stub out notes cover what we've talked about. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve zoning application 2022-772. And that, let's check our notes here. It is consistent with the land use plan because it proposes medical office adjacent to the hospital property and retail and financial uses along the frontage of Matthews Township Parkway. And of course, the application is reasonable in that it creates new non-residential uses within the Matthews Township Parkway corridor.
I'll second that motion.
Motion from Commissioner Urban, second by Commissioner Whitley. Is there any further discussion?
Did he include the conditions set by staff? Did I hear that part?
Well, so let's talk about that really quick. It says approval of TIA. We're kind of saying we're taking it on the advisement of both staff and the resident expert. The medical office dumpster, I'm comfortable with them saying we have a plan B. We have all the notes to make that connection in the future. Are you saying that you would like to go ahead and have that done now? Because that's how I'm reading it. That condition says move the dumpster now. And I'm saying no, when the connection's made, you move the dumpster. And civil has told us how they would move the dumpster.
That's fine.
Okay. And then, so would Jay, to you, do we need to have that cross access easement agreement in place as a note, or would there be something I would need to amend? Or is that a moot point?
Jay, can you talk in the microphone, please?
I think for the future, when you look at plan right with the stub to the Harris Teeter property, which most likely will redevelop, and then also to the hospital, cross access just ensures that those property owners have a right for visitors to traverse this site.
Okay, so that's copacetic with you, Brittany?
Yes, we can condition the approval on cross access agreement.
So I would take my motion and I would amend it to saying they'll be providing a cross access agreement for future connectivity to that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, Commissioner Hoover.
I just want to be clear for you guys to understand, this is nothing against your project. I like the project, but for me, I have to have a clear mind in knowing that this property is clear and okay to be developed on. So my apologies, but I cannot support this.
Okay, is there any further discussion before I call for the vote? We had a motion by Commissioner Urban, second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? Any opposed? And that passes 5-2 with Commissioner Hoover and Tufano in opposition. Move on to item C, zoning application 2023-776 RE assets. Change the zoning classification from R20 to B1CD on that certain property designated as 2025 Matthews Mint Hill Road and further designated as tax parcel 193-311-14. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief with this one. Staff has not received any updates to the site plan and we just received an updated TIA in response to staff comments. So we are recommending that the motion to continue this decision to October 9th, 2023.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we continue this decision to October 9th, 2023.
A second.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner.
So here's the question. Is the petitioner asking, or is staff saying, hey, we don't have everything and we want to continue it? Meaning, has the petitioner not done his due diligence in the process?
No, this is I think this is a staff request.
So you're waiting on some more information.
So we're waiting on more information. Yes, sir.
But that means you're waiting on the petitioner.
Yes, sir.
But isn't it the petitioner's obligation to have the public hearing, meet with planning board and respond to you? And so they haven't responded to you. So you're like, okay, we'll wait for you. Is that what we're saying?
What we're saying is we would like to continue this decision because we have not received anything from the petitioner. So,
okay. And when any other board of commissioners, based on our rules and regulations, December after the meeting, ask for a deferral, I have no problem, and I will honor that. But if it was in my book, they're not toting the line, I'd have them out of here. But I will definitely honor the deferral as requested by Commissioner McCool.
Commissioner Garner.
I mean, I think in that, for me, I would say one deferral. And then if they don't get it back by the next planning meeting, then.
And I agree, totally.
Stop
I just
wasting our
didn't feel
time.
the love and the reach out from the petitioner, being honest with you, to any of the board members about how can we work together, whatever. It's been done with staff, and it's just not, didn't feel right.
Yeah,
That's all.
it's kind of a waste of time. For everybody, right?
But I'll thank you.
All right, we have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. That will be continued to our October 9th meeting. Move on to item D, zoning application 2023-779 Davis to change the conditions and site plan on that certain OCD zoning site designated as 541 West Charles Street and further designated as tax parcel 193-251-13. This was continued from August 14th. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this was continued. We had last month, we had received a letter listing several concerns submitted to the board by Mr. Roger Martin. Board asked staff to consider these concerns and respond to Mr. Martin's letter. We have done that. Unless it's the board's pleasure, I'm not going to read through all of the questions and responses, but in summary, staff, both Public Works and Planning, do not see any outstanding issues based on Mr. Martin's concerns. The points he raised may be mitigated, and they would possibly occur with any construction proposal on the site.
Any questions for Rob?
So Rob, I think I was either speaking with you or Jay or a combination thereof. I think one of the things that's bothering me and maybe bothering some other board members is this boundary line of a 57-foot by 63-foot boundary. And I'll excuse me, I did the math, I just didn't write it down. But if we do 57 by, so it's a footprint of some 3,600 square feet. That's a sizable single family home. And obviously duplex. Is there any concern on the planning staff size that we shouldn't have some level of constriction to that footprint or that area? Because there's no footprint. They're not showing me a building footprint. So I have no clue what could happen. And so this person could build wall to wall, straight up, no articulation. I'm waiting for a little head nod here from Jay, maybe, other than what's in the guidelines, from that aspect. And so, we're really sort of doing ourselves a disservice for the level and the quality of that corridor. I mean, Roger did an excellent job on the building next door. It's sort of respectful of the site and gives some breathing room. So I guess my question to you is, are we not giving ourselves enough breathing room from that aspect of it? Because I've heard from adjacent homeowners or adjacent building owners and Roger, et cetera. I do thank CJ for responding to all Roger's comments. So I'm mostly concerned about this maximum envelope issue.
Ms. Davis is on it.
Ms. Davis, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would. Good evening, everybody. With respect to the envelope, the elevations that I presented are actually within the dimensions that are reflected there. And my understanding is that they are well within the code requirements. So I'm having some, I guess I'm still confused on what the issue would be with respect to the size of the structure.
So I guess, Mike, so if we have elevations, there must be a footprint for those elevations. So would there not be a reason that we couldn't see the actual footprint placed on the site plan? So we know what.
I'm sorry, when you say footprint, you're not talking about the floor plan, I presume?
I'm talking about the outline borderline of the floor plan of the structure, meaning these two elevations could actually be the exact same floor plan or footprint. I just doubt that it's actually taking up 57 feet by 63 feet. So I'm wondering, is it possible to get a floor plan or a footprint placed on the site plan that says these are the demarcation limits of the buildable area?
Okay, so for the duplex, it measures 62 feet long by 40 feet wide. So that's well within the parameters of the envelope. And then with respect, because I just still have not made a final decision as to whether I want to do the single family or the duplex. So the dimensions of the single family, they essentially fit what you see there, the 57.1 by 61.1. So if we do the single family, it will take up the envelope essentially. But if we do the duplex, it's only 40 feet wide.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions for Rob or the applicant? Would anybody like to make a motion? Commissioner Garner.
I just wonder, I guess, to Commissioner Urban's point, does it make sense to approve well, it's all built in. I mean, I think the confusion is that the details make a difference, right? And so not all of those details are there. And so
I guess if you ask me what would be my preference, and of course that's probably not a good thing to ask, but in thinking of the corridor, thinking of the development of downtown and the need for the diversity of housing types, whether it's a duplex, triplex, sixplex, whatever, I'd love it to be a sixplex, no doubt about it. I could rightfully easily approve a duplex on there tonight at 42 feet 40, knowing that I've got the elbow room. It may free up some of the parking aspects of it. It's that makes sense in the scope and the scale and the nature of what we're trying to do downtown. I don't think a 3,600 square foot or possibly 7,200 square foot two-story home is what we need in that corridor. Now, if it was a two-story structure that had office spaces in it and things like that. So there's bits and pieces of this missing. But if you said residential purely, I'd rather see a duplex, and I could vote for the duplex. Does that help?
I mean, it does, but I think overall it's the site plan that's confusing, right? Because we have pictures of the elevation, but we aren't sure if that's exactly what it's.
But that was my other parts of the conversation. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so.
Well, I did explain that it's going to be one of those two. It will be one of those two. So I can appreciate, I just have not made a final decision. Initially, when we started out the process, we were looking at something totally different. I didn't, when it was realized, or once we learned that we were not going to be able to do the chapel, I didn't want to just totally just cut and run. I said, well, okay, we'll just change gears, because certainly we will be able to do something residential on it, because it was already zoned to allow for the single family. And but I would have preferred to go through the process to hopefully also have ourselves situated so that we could also potentially do the duplex.
So okay, so I guess I missed that point that it was, and I think you've said it, so it's on me. I'm sorry about that. That it is one of these two elevations.
Yes, absolutely.
The potential is there for it to be a two-story, sort of.
Well, my preference is the single story that you see the elevation for there. That is my preference. My intent is to do a single story, whether it's a duplex or a single family home.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'm kind of in lockstep with Commissioner Urban too. I think I'd prefer to see a duplex on this site, and I'd be happy to vote for that tonight. It's just a diversity of housing types, and duplexes inherently make things cheaper. So, the affordability standpoint. I also do feel concerned. I don't want to see a 7,200 square foot house on this site. I don't think it would be very good. So I'm kind of in the same thought process as John.
Commissioner Urban.
Can I back up the proverbial half step? Rob, I have it in my notes, and there's lots of notes, but I mean, what's the by right zoning of this site?
It's actually,
this is just a condition.
It's a conditional.
Okay.
It's office conditional.
Okay.
And it was a part of another parcel.
Right.
So there's nothing that can be done until we do a change of
residential
condition.
nature. We're sort of down zoning the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's not a lot of people want to do that. And because it's a conditional change of conditions, this goes to Charlie. Charlie, we're not running any violation of the aesthetics ruling out of Raleigh, are we? Because we're dealing with because we're in a conditional plan. So they have to. It's all voluntary.
Yeah, it's
okay. I just wanted to make sure because okay. Okay. So again, my druthers is I really like your top elevation. It has that nice sort of appeal of craftsman to it. It fits in sort of architecturally to the adjacent structures. The one on the bottom to me is sort of farmhouse vernacular and doesn't necessarily fit some of the context in that area. But I don't know how Rest Board wants to handle it. But I mean, we normally are very picky. We're normally very precise about things are. So I will just put it out there is that, the top elevation, it's a duplex at 42 by 40 would be my particular vote. And I think would be best serving what staff and the town board is trying to sort of deliberate on diversity of housing types and getting more housing downtown.
And just a point of correction, that would be 62 by 40. I just noticed you stated 42 by 40, but it is 62 by 40.
Well, that's the depth, but at least the width, 42 feet would cut off. Let's see, 42. Yeah, that would cut off 12, 14, 15 feet. Yeah, so that's a lot better in my mind, and I think it's more comparable to the adjacent structures.
Commissioner Garner.
At one point, I believe you said you thought you might move into this in the future.
Right, long term, right.
So long term, if they build a duplex now, what prohibits them from converting it to a single family house in the future?
Well, I do have a question on that point because my understanding is that it's already zoned to allow for the single family. Rob, if you will correct me if I'm wrong on that point, but that's my understanding. So the whole point of this was to also include the duplex because I just was not confident. Also, the building that's to, like if you're facing the property, the building that's to the immediate right, that is a very large building. Now, granted, it's on a much, much larger lot, obviously. And then they have the very large parking lot in the back. So it kind of leaves with our lot, there's a parking lot literally on every side of our property. There's a parking lot on each side, and each of those two properties have some natural screening, some plantings. There is a parking lot immediately behind us. So we are proposing to put some screening along the rear of our property. And then there's a parking lot across the street. So I'm just trying, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm beautifying this space by adding something, beautiful. in terms of whether it's residential or duplex, but there's literally just parking lots all the way around our lot. So in terms of aesthetics, whether it is a home or the duplex, and again, I'm not 100% leaning towards either. But it's just in my mind, I just feel like whatever we put there is going to be just adding to the beautification of this space.
Well, and that's what I'm looking to do, but I'm not necessarily a proponent of all those parking spaces. I would have been doing shared parking agreements. I would have done less parking. To Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem's comment about the parking and shared parking and the fact that not everybody has two cars, et cetera. So everybody on this board knows I'm an advocate for less parking, but those are older petitions. Roger got more parking than he needed as far as I'm concerned. So I can't talk about what's been passed, but I think in downtown, the walkability nature of this things, the opportunity, two families access to this instead of one would be really important to me. And if it means fine tuning the notes that it's a single story duplex, I mean, we can craft the notes to make it so it doesn't get to the point of who said 2-story or somebody flipped that out. I mean, but
Right. That is, yes, sir. We can fine tune the notes. And we have done site plan approval. Right now, the notes say elevation approval to come back to the board.
Okay.
We can add possibly site plan approval to that if it would make you feel more comfortable.
I mean, because I think, and just to be fair to the petitioner, if you've not sat in a lot of our petitions, when we're dealing with conditions and changes in rezoning, we really want to WYSIWYG. We want to see what we get, so to speak. And it's just like the last petition is we thought we were getting something that met the guidelines, the traditions, the goals, the objectives of the town, and it didn't turn out that way. And then we get the ugly emails and the pitchforks come out and all that kind of stuff. So I want to make sure that this does meet that. I know you're well-intentioned to want to do something here, but we just like to see more information to ground this petition. And Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, she said she could by right this, but I'm still thinking this was a office condition. So the only thing she could do is that condition, which would be an office.
Right. A single family home was permitted in the list of uses for the old condition, but a duplex was not. Duplex is permitted in the overall office, but it just wasn't a part of this conditional zone.
So then if they went back to the default, they could just fill up that box.
Yeah, it was a conditional plan with a driveway on it.
So this is really residual space, trying to find the best use of a piece of residual space.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I still hold that just really nice boutique infill projects make that really necessary in this kind of environment.
So to get some clarification here, by right, the Davises could build a single family home, or Jay, you're saying no? Do you want to?
No, not by right. It would have to be a change of conditions to the existing conditional zoning district.
But a single family home is allowed in that classification.
Yes, sir.
I think we have gotten a commitment that there's no intention to build a 2-story 3,600 block, which would be a massive McMansion. So I don't think that's going to be built. It'll be single, one level. So I'm kind of comfortable approving what they're asking for.
With the boundary as dictated, without knowing exactly what that boundary is.
Yeah. Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, I agree with the mayor on this one, and I also agree with the petitioner that this is a beautification of this area, regardless if it's a duplex or a home. And I thank you very much for even considering putting a residential in this kind of environment. Thank you.
Commissioner Garner.
Would you be more comfortable, Commissioner Urban, if we had the dimensions of both of these as they fit into that footprint, so that we're not saying we're not approving this because they're slightly smaller than.
If it's 42 by 60, I think I'd be more amenable to that. No,
What's
for
the
duplex.
duplex.
But I'm saying, so my condition is you can 42 by 60 and you can do the aspects of the duplex, but I'm looking to meet that diversity of housing types downtown. Because if we do a single, it's the difference between $1 million home and two 400,000. I mean, I don't know what the number would be, but
What's the footprint size of the single family option?
The single family is 57 feet wide and is 61 feet long.
I haven't made any motion, so anybody can make a motion and I could vote for or against it. But I mean, I'm just putting the opportunity out there. This is my thought process on this project.
Make the motion and whatever you want to fix up. She says she'll go along with whatever we need to add to that. I'll second it. Thank you.
Well, it's really up to the petitioner. I mean, if the petitioner is willing to accept the 42 by 60 duplex, and we go from there.
I'm not positioned to just outright say I'm going to absolutely do the duplex because I have not made a final decision on that as of yet. My understanding was that we are well within the code requirement for the single family or the duplex. So, I mean, the dimensions are now reflecting the 57 feet wide. That would be the width of the single family home. So we did reduce it in that particular regard. Obviously, if we do the duplex, it's going to be even less wide because it will only be 40 feet. But we just have not made that final decision. I would like to have that flexibility. And my understanding is with the language on the plan, we would have to get the elevation approval from you all, regardless, before we would ever be permitted. So I would prefer to hopefully gain your approval tonight on the site plan.
Commissioner Whitley.
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing is she want to have an opportunity to make up her mind which one she want to develop, but in any event, both of them are approvable. But John, if you could add the thing, a stipulation about the duplex, if she decide to go to duplex, then you'll have that in there. But then, you know, I think bottom line is it's her decision and her call to make. And I don't think we as board member, we can recommend what we would like to have, but the bottom line is both of them are approvable and they all both meet the zoning requirements, both of them.
Well, but see, that's why I'm confused as to why we're even here talking about that then. I mean,
because right now I don't have, with the conditions that are existing, I'm not allowed to do the duplex.
And she's going to bring it back. Whatever do is have to come back to us anyway. Is that am I hitting
no,
the mark on it?
I understand what you're saying, but it's so she wants permission to do the duplex, but may or may not do the duplex.
Right. But that's her right. That's her right as the developer.
She's in the
whatever it is, it's coming back to us for the final.
So if I were to say, okay, I'm going to build this jumbo mega mansion, you're going to have the opportunity to say no, Ms. Davis.
Right. No, down the road.
Right.
Commissioner Tufano.
I'd like to make a motion to approve zoning application 2023-779 because it's consistent with the zoning and with the land use plan because it creates a residential use in the downtown area of Matthews. It's also reasonable. And because it's the zoning application, it provides a residential use and preserves 2 significant oak trees on the property.
A motion by Commissioner Tufano, a second by Commissioner Hoover. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of that motion? Any opposed? That passes 6-1 with Mayor Pro Tem in opposition. Thank you. Move on to the next one. E, zoning application 2023-780, text amendment to change the text of the town code regarding accessory structures and recreational uses in or adjacent to residential settings to allow accessory structures and front setback in the RI district under specific conditions and to allow pools and pool houses in the RI district under certain conditions. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant, FC Matthews LLC, is proposing two text amendments. The first will allow for accessory structures of less than 600 square feet to encroach up to 15 feet into the front yard setback, which it still would be required to be 35 feet from the property line. In the specific case of an independent living facility with a conditional site plan in the RI zoning district. The second text amendment will reduce the setback specific to pools in a housing complex from 100 feet to 35 feet. The amendment limits the exception to independent living facilities with a conditional site plan in the RI zoning district and shall include opaque screening such as a brick wall that would complement the principal structure. I do want to go over a couple things with the board. Jay, if you could just zoom out a little bit so I can show this to the board. This was per your request, Commissioner Gardner, and thank you for that request because it made me think, oh yeah, I wonder if there are other places that could take advantage of this text amendment. There are many areas that are zoned RICD, and they are in light blue hatched. Most of them are churches or schools. So we do have 4 independent living facilities: the Arden, Matthews Glen, Royal Park, and Windsor Run. So they are zoned RICD. I'm gonna zip through this. This is independent living facilities. This is the UDO definition of independent living facilities, and it includes CCRCs, so continuing care retirement communities. So that's the reason mainly for the 3 other sites. They're CCRCs in RICD. That's a lot of acronyms. I apologize. The impacted projects would be Windsor Run. Let's see, that one is Matthews Glen. My clickers. And then Royal Park, and then also the as to be built Arden on Idlewild Road. So most of these places have many amenities for their residents, but the text amendment, I mean, they could come back and request an amendment to their site plans to add a pool. I think the other projects are much larger in area, so I don't think they would have any need to come back if they wanted to add a pool. It wouldn't encroach in the front setback.
All right. Any questions or motions? Commissioner Tofano.
Yes, thank you, Rob. I'm fine with this, with the exception of the ambiguity of the definition of shrub. So,
okay.
All right. So it has to be every 5 linear feet, but no definition on mature height or plant height or anything like that. And the definition of the shrub is going to make a huge difference on how this mitigates the appearance of this variance to the public. So I'd like to see some definition specifically of what this shrub is going to look like.
Okay. I see what you're talking about. In the one shrub shall be planted for every 5 linear feet of accessory structure facing the property line. Okay. What would you be interested in? Maybe a height? Minimum height?
Well, actually, as we all know, they're not going to put in a mature shrub, but there should be some minimum planted height, and also a definition on what the mature height would be. In order to have some kind of assurance that this is actually going to be a visual barrier in the future.
Ms. Lenz, is that okay with you? So you can, reasonable standard. We want some sequoia shrubs.
So I don't think I could vote on this without that. So if you would be so kind as to make maybe some commitment now that we can move forward with this.
This can't be site specific though, because it's a text amendment. So we can't necessarily say that specifically.
So I think we could, in the writing, still keep it general enough in the text amendment. And thank you, Commissioner McCool, for raising that. But I think having a minimum standard, and I will definitely defer to Scott on what is a reasonable shrub height. But I think I understand the question or the request as being a shrub of a minimum of X height at planting and X plus height at maturity within so many odd years. So understand that. I think we can certainly do something there. I'm curious if you have thoughts on what shrub heights are.
I apologize. I left it kind of vague because I'm fairly certain that in your ordinance, it does specify, gives dimensions on shrubs. So that's why I did leave it as a shrub, because I believe it's already defined in the ordinance, but I could be mistaken. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you also state your name for the record, sir?
Yeah, Scott Kiger, Design Resource Group.
I think it's a very valid point because I'm familiar with a neighborhood near where I live that was required to put in shrubs because they cut too many trees down and they put in an evergreen ground cover that's about 6 inches tall and it's about 20 years old. So didn't do a whole lot. So it's a valid point.
So is his statement is defined in the town ordinance?
Jay, can you answer that, or Rob? Is there a size?
Just a plant list.
But there's no size specified?
No. Okay, well, we can call it out as an evergreen shrub to reach a maturity height of 5 feet.
And even though this is a text amendment, it's going to apply elsewhere. So it's, I think it's necessary to pay attention to it now.
So that you agree with that? And Commissioner Tofano, does that meet your requirement? I mean, mature feet of a minimum of 5 feet?
And planted height at 24 inches to start off with and mature height of 5 feet.
And what about the contiguousy of the shrubs? In other words, they may not ever meet and therefore the barrier is not applicable. Sorry to be such a stickler on this, but if we don't define this now, this could be something that the public can see through and it's not, the whole purpose of this is going to be totally lost.
Mr. Urban, would you like?
Commissioner Urban, go
So I think we may be confused here a little bit. The screening aspect that we're talking about in the text amendment is only the screening of the accessory structure.
Correct.
It is not the screening of the fence. That's why we created the fence as a masonry decorative piece. It is the fact that the mason, as depicted in this diagram, is the accessory structure could back up to the line. And in working with Brittany and the landscape folks, I mentioned that I wanted to see two things, either a very nicely articulated facade or it be camouflaged with shrubbery or a combination thereof. So I don't have a problem in saying, minimum height 5 feet and maximum height 10 feet. So it doesn't block the whole thing, but it's not going to be something that's continuous. Correct. So you're really just looking about how you are relating the shrubbery to the accessory structure. And a single story structure is going to be 8 foot, 9 foot, or 10 foot plate height. And so you would only ornament to that proportion. So a third or a half or a whole. So 3 feet, 6 feet, 9 feet, something like that, just to set some terms up here. But all we're talking about is, in this room, if that screens the accessory structure, we're only screening that screen and everything else is 5 or 6 foot fence. I just want, because I think I was hearing, it's like we're screening everything that's not. And so my segue though, is that you mention the transparent glass and or a faux window. Transparent glass and or opaque glass is fine. but I don't want to go away with the faux window because I can imagine all the sort of abominations that can come up from an architect on how to create a faux window that look really, really bad. So it should be a window that's transparent or a window that's opaque. That's fine. And it says architectural elements every 10 feet, such as, blah, 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 blah. Every 10 feet, minimum 2. Because if it's an 18-foot long building, I get a cyclops. If I have minimum 2, I'm going to get some level of balance on that. And that's all I'm looking for is just consistency, scale, proportion, the whole 9 yards, because we're bringing things towards the street, we're bringing things towards the public, and so we're having to look for that balance. So if you're 20 feet, it works out great, but if you're smaller than that, because that's probably a pool pump house, correct?
Correct.
16 feet
Or
long, something like
restrooms.
that, you'd only get 1 window if you said every 10 feet. So 1 window every 10 feet, minimum 2.
Understood. So just to read in the record, I think we are agreeable to changing it to say that it'll be transparent glass or opaque glass, removing faux glass, and then also saying it'll be a minimum of 2 architectural features.
Right. And then you have to debate with Commissioner Tofano on the screening aspect of it, because I think that could be readily remedied very quickly here.
Well, I think there was some specificity. Yeah, that word, specificity.
I can't say that word.
Yeah, that word. 2 feet minimum and 5 feet minimum mature. I don't know if that's acceptable. to
Yeah,
Commissioner.
sure. Mature in how many years?
5 years.
Okay. So 2 feet planted, 5 feet matured in 5 years.
5 feet minimum.
5 feet minimum.
Could be bigger.
Yes,
yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
5 feet minimum in 5 years. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Fano, you care to make a motion, sir?
I think I will. I would like to make a motion to approve zoning application 2023 with the contingency of, this is going to be difficult to repeat Commissioner Urban's contingency as well. 2 architectural, how would you like to word that?
Say 1 window per 10 feet, minimum 2.
1 window per 10 feet, minimum 2, and shrub screening with the planting height of 2 feet, minimum mature in 5 years of 5 feet. And it's because this is consistent with the land use plan and it allows for limited encroachment of the front yard setback and still preserves the setback intent. It's also reasonable because it provides the opportunity for an accessory use that will be complementary to conditionally approved projects.
Okay, we have a very lengthy motion from Commissioner Tofano. Do we have a second? Second from Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Is there any further discussion? All of that was agreeable to the applicants? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? I think you voted twice, so we got 8. 8-0. Yeah, thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item F, administrative amendment, Briley mixed use. This was continued from August 14th. Mr. Camp.
Just want to thank Rob. He served admirably in the hot seat tonight for like 5 straight items.
And you were letting him fry.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
On the agenda tonight is the administrative amendment request. Again, this is for the existing land, which is not just the Briley apartments that you know, but the undeveloped area around it. The reason being for the administrative amendment is that we are trying to align that development with the pending Midfield Station development, but primarily around getting the alignment right for the Silver Line alignment. So the developer's been working very closely with us on that. And I just wanted to also add that the administrative amendment needs to be approved if Midfield Station were to move forward, if there is a vote for an approval at some point in the next several months, that the administrative amendment is kind of tied in and needs to occur first. So having said that, the developers requested 1 additional month as we continue to go through revision upon revision upon revision to some of the notes, primarily around the Silver Line. Happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or motions?
I'd like to make a motion that we defer this decision until October 9th, 2023.
Second.
Continue.
Continue. Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
the wording in the memo was different.
All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the next item, site plan elevation approval for Barley Matthews, mixed use building 15.
Right, so this is for a proposed mixed-use building that would actually front right on Matthews Mint Hill Road at the entrance to the Briley. There were some concerns about the architecture when this came to the board, I think about 2 months ago. The applicant continues to work on revisions to that architecture to kind of bring it more up to the standards of Matthews. So they're requesting a 1-month continuation.
Any questions or motions?
I'll make a motion now. You got deferred. Is that deferred or continue? Okay, I'd like to make a motion. We continue site plan building elevation of Monday, October 9th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner Urban. Any discussion? All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And you gave Will all the hard stuff. And
didn't plan it out that
Will.
way.
All right, let's go on to H, site plan elevation approval, Matthews Station lot parcel 215-012-34. I would like to mention that Commissioner Urban worked on this initially, but no longer does, so he does not need to be recused, correct, Mr. Buckley? So, Jay Camp. This has been a long time coming.
All right, so if you all recall, back in December, you all voted on the final site plan and elevation for the last lot, the Matthews Station development, 23 years in the making. Since that time, Brahm Investments has been assessing the viability of the original plan for the site, which was more of a market food hall. They've come back to us with a very minor change to the site plan, as well as some revisions to the architecture. The architecture is now being done by a different firm out of Philadelphia, I believe. But again, pursuant to the covenants, or actually the downtown development project, the agreement, Charlie, any changes to architecture come back to the board. So I kind of put this in backward order. So I'm going to scroll through real quick and go to the existing elevations. If you'll recall, this is an in-cap view. If you were driving down toward Town Hall, this was the front elevation. So the former building where Beantown Tavern used to be is kind of to the left there, the PNC Bank here to the right. So just the architecture, really a 2-story building with maybe some enclosed area and a 3rd floor, could have been a rooftop bar or restaurant. The revisions, and you all may have already reviewed these, but just for everyone here watching this evening, these are the updated renderings. So again, we have new architecture. The building is similar to the previous architecture. There have been some modifications made. There is more of a full 3rd story to the building now. And here's a better shot here. So still an opportunity for a rooftop cafe or restaurant. And then kind of a view looking back toward Trade Street. There's a good shot that kind of captures the full building. We also have interior floor plans, really not part of the approval, but it does give you, where did those go? Sorry, I'm making everybody dizzy here as I'm scrolling. Anyways, I'm not sure where they're at in the presentation, but it does show 5 retail spaces on the 1st floor. To me, that really meets the intent of the market hall. We've got an opportunity for 4 or 5 businesses to locate, and potentially another on the top floor. And I'm happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Commissioner Tufano?
Yes, what's the maximum height of all the buildings along Station Street? What's the tallest one?
Well, technically Town Hall. We
I mean, with the exception of Town Hall, I apologize.
Still 40 feet. Yeah, it's so 40 feet to the top plate. So the parapet, this is above 40 feet here. But if you were to kind of trace a line, the roof is probably somewhere, John, probably in that area maybe. So that's the top plate, and then the parapet can go above.
So like the nail salon, the building that they're in, the ones that's going to be adjacent to it. You say that that is 40 feet tall?
That's probably short. That's a two-story.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Probably the building where Flying Biscuit is has the most height. It's a tall two-story because it's a pitched roof and it's got the turret at the corner.
So visually from Trade Street, the Flying Biscuit and this building would have a continuity in appearance, mainly because it's also further back, so it would have the appearance of being smaller.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was concerned about, was just having this imposing structure overpower everything else that was in there.
It gives us some variety, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it a
okay.
lot. I mean, I'm all for it. I was just trying to get how it fits in with the rest of the buildings in terms of height. So you're just saying it's only a matter of 5 or 10 feet?
Yeah, at most, an additional floor, plus
Okay.
or minus 10 feet, 12 feet.
Thanks. That's all I needed. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we approve the revised site plan and elevation for the vacant lot on Matthews Station Street.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Whitley. Is there any further discussion? I think this has been a long time coming. It's a beautiful building, and I can't wait to stand up there on the open area at the top and survey downtown Matthews. So looking forward to it. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let's take about a 10-minute break, and we'll come back with the rest of the agenda at 9:20. No, it's all right. All right, we don't have a whole lot left on our agenda, so let's finish up. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, the consent agenda.
Before we approve the consent agenda, I tried to raise my hand and you moved pretty quickly. I want a point of clarification on 11B, the update on the pillars, the Veterans Memorial pillars. Have this gone through the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and MVAC?
I would have to look to see if the original design did. I don't believe anything has circled back through them in the short term related to this pulling out and just constructing the pillars.
Okay, that was just that in itself was my question. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Tufano.
So have all the bids have already been received? At least that's the way I'm reading it.
The last one came in Friday.
Okay. And what is, when is the deadline for approving which one of these vendors you're going to select?
There's not a deadline. It's an informal bid process. So I know Corey will be working on it this week.
So you're going to make a decision this week?
I couldn't say one way or the other. I know he'll be reviewing them to determine which one to select.
Well, I'm just saying the clock is ticking here, and I'm wondering why there'd be some delay in approving these vendors, which one you would select.
So the larger delay is going to be through the permitting process with the county. And so I know that he is working with Kirk Lowry on the materials that will need to be submitted to the county. And then we're also looking for clarification from the county on which permit will actually be required because there was some discrepancy. So there's no delay being caused by a vendor selection at this point. It's going to be that permitting process that's going to probably take the longest through this. So once a vendor is selected, we expect about a 2-week construction period.
So there's a building permit required to build 4 pillars on town property.
So we have reached out to the county to request confirmation on which type of permit is required. It's possible that it may be as simple as a sign permit, but there was some discrepancy at the county level regarding which permit. So at this point in time, I couldn't tell you which kind of permit is required. We're waiting to hear back from the county on that point.
And I'm sure you're going to follow up and make sure they give you an answer in an expeditious manner.
Yeah, Corey's on top of it. There was just some differences in the fact that there will be a sign on one of the pillars. That's the simplest process, is the sign permit. And so we're trying to get clarification that it could be approved that way because that's going to be the fastest path. But what we don't want to do is submit the wrong kind of permit application only to be told then by the county that we submitted the wrong kind and then we have to start the process over. So we're trying to get it right on the front end.
I'm just a little confused why the county is involved in a sign on a piece of town property and on town property.
So the county is involved in anything related to building permits.
Yeah, I just installed a tankless water heater at my house and I had to pull a plumbing, gas, and electrical permit from the county. So there's a lot of permits.
Any sign, even if it's the municipality who has applied for it, has to go through what they call Louisa and through an intergovernmental program, intergovernmental agreement where they perform all the permitting on behalf of the town.
Very well. Thank you.
Any further discussion on that item or anything else on the consent agenda? Who made the motion to?
Nobody.
He's making it right now.
All right. Well,
I'd like to make a motion. We approve consent agenda A through D1.
a motion by Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Move on to new business. Consider purchase of long lead items for Fire Station 3 generator. Chief Kinnenberg.
Council members, we continue to work on the design for Station 3. And this is part 2 of the long lead item procurement authorization that we're seeking. We've worked with Optima Engineering and Samet on the actual size and scope of the generator. We've looked at several options, natural gas, propane, diesel. Diesel is the most economical solution to this. So the generator itself is 200 kW. And the way we've arranged it, we've combined the fuel utility and the generator fuel tank into one unit to save cost on a second fuel utility for the trucks. So we're asking you to authorize $110,200 so that we can reserve our place in line with Generac for the construction of this generator.
What's the $200 for, Chief? I don't see it on there.
Yeah, there's a couple versions of this memo, and if you refer to the Samet graphic at the bottom, combining the generator and the fuel tank, the total is $110,200.
Are there any questions for Chief Kinnenberg or motions? Commissioner Garner.
Chief, we got an email today about some environmental, I guess, suggestions in lieu of the generator that's proposed today. Have you considered a natural gas fired unit with a backup propane connection?
Yes, we have.
And what was the basis of your decision to go in this direction versus that one?
Natural gas and propane are more expensive, almost double the cost of a diesel generator. And the diesel generator allows us to combine the apparatus fueling utility under it. So the tank is 2,000 gallons and it provides 1 month of fuel for our diesel powered apparatus and a minimum of 72 hours runtime at full load for the generator.
Thank you. You had me at cost less.
Figured you wanted the full explanation.
Well, I was going to be upset if you just said, yes, I considered it with no explanation. So thank you for that. Are there any motions? Commissioner Urban.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we authorize the use of $110,000 of the existing town funds for Summit to initiate the procurement of certain long lead equipment necessary.
Add the 200 to that.
Oh, yeah, hold on.
There's a typo. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Backup use of $110,200 of existing town funds for Summit to initiate procurement of certain long lead. That should be long lead time. Why don't we just say generator? Including backup generator, fuel tank, and dispensing pump as proposed. Let's make it definitive here as outlined in the memo from Rob Kinneborough dated September 11th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Urban, second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to item 12B, consider purchase of real property. Ms. Hawk.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. What you have in front of you tonight is an opportunity to purchase the property located at 251 South Trade Street, which is adjacent to the current Matthews Elementary site. Just for reference, the parcel is about 0.7 acres in size and currently has a home situated on it. This is land banking for the potential future park relocation across the street. That has certainly not been decided upon at this point, but is a vision that the town is considering. And parcels like this, when they come up for sale, they're not always on our schedule, but this is one that we do believe is very important if we do ultimately look to relocate the parks to a larger opportunity across the road, that this would be an important parcel to have in order to complete that vision. If the park does not come to fruition across the street at that location, the town would certainly have the ability to resell this property on the open market. And if there is an interest in renting out the house between now and any potential development decisions, that would certainly be an ability to make some cash back. So because of the use of this as far as a future signature park that would allow us to hold our special events, it is tourism eligible. And so we are suggesting that if the board wishes to move forward with this, that we would use our tourism fund balance to make this purchase. So happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I've got two questions. First, what's the condition of the house? I don't know. Is it livable? I think, Mark, you had said someone who was living there recently.
So it's been a rental property
Okay.
for a number of years. We do believe that there may need to be some carpeting that would likely need to be replaced, but we do know that there have been some updates to some of the fixtures in the home. So once it's purchased, we would get in it and we would bring back if there's a little bit of money that would need to be invested. But at least based on what we've seen so far, we think that it would likely be some simple flooring would probably get it into a reasonable status.
And then secondly, say you buy it for 500,000 using tourism money, the park falls through and 10 years we sell it. Will that money then go back to replenish the tourism fund? And how does that work exactly? Because what worries me is you're depleting it and then you go back and maybe put it in if you do sell it. Obviously, it's not what we want to do, but.
So I'd defer to Mr. Buckley, but I would say there would be nothing prohibitive about directing the proceeds of that sale to go back into the tourism fund, because you can always make the dollars more restrictive if you would desire, as opposed to making them less restrictive. So I wouldn't see any issues with that.
Well, if it's never going to be used for the intended festival use, then that becomes problematic in using tourism funds to have purchased it. So I think you would have to.
So then the funds would have to go back into that fund.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yeah, I'm sure you've vetted using tourism funds for this, but I'm having difficulty understanding how a speculative land purchase could possibly be conceived as a park, which is what the tourism funds are supposed to. Maybe you can help me understand that. But before we get into that, what is the fund balance currently for tourism fund?
I don't have the exact dollar amount, but I know that it's over $1 million currently.
Okay. So Mr. Buckley, can you help me understand how a speculative purchase could be used?
It's not really a speculative purpose. I know that the final decision on what's going to happen is going to be dependent on the school system. And not our decision, but the intent to buy is because of its location. It's about to hit the market. It's really an emergency purchase, so to speak. And right now, the intent is to apply it towards a future. And it's not just parks are not the ones that are eligible for tourism funds, but what is eligible are for the major festival events. And this would be for the major festival events improvements for the town of Matthews. So that's what makes it initially eligible for tourism funds, because of the special events such as Matthews Alive, Beach Fest, other festivals that go on there.
It's a stretch, but a plausible one. Thank you for that explanation.
Yes, sir.
I do want to address one of the issues brought forward by one of our public commenters regarding Commissioner Tufano's property. I've been an elected official for 10 years. I've never voted to condemn any land in the town of Matthews. I have no intention of ever suggesting that we condemn Mr. Tufano's property either. So, well, yes, for the exception of a sidewalk, but certainly not a piece of property like for a park. So, yeah, I stand corrected. We did that tonight, but I'm sorry. Yeah, that was a friendly condemnation that someone asked for. I don't think Commissioner Tufano is asking for us to condemn his property. So I think this makes good sense. We need the property. If this goes forward, it'll be very useful. And I think it's a wise use of our funds. So I'll leave it at that. Commissioner Garner.
I think it's a good opportunity for us to, I guess, address some of the conjecture on how we got to this point. So I would like to speak to that for a minute. I think once we realized that Matthews Elementary is one of the oldest schools and it's going to be rebuilt, and heard a little bit about how it would be rebuilt on the back of the property, or it could be, we realized that there was a good opportunity for a park. Our planning director had the vision that that could be a park. But to ask Becky a little bit about the planning process and how things move forward, and when we get to the point of public input, and which we certainly will get to, right? I mean, that's just part of the democratic process. Maybe you could give a little clarity on that.
Sure. So you're exactly right, Commissioner Garner. No decisions have been made whatsoever. So what we have been is continuing an ongoing relationship with CMS regarding partnership opportunities and helping to determine, ultimately this board, CMS will be looking for input from this board regarding where you might desire to see the school rebuilt, whether that's going to be on this site or potentially at a different location. And we would certainly expect a public input process to help you all determine how you would like to direct CMS in that fashion. So until we know what's happening with the bonds, it's really hard to hold that process, because we just don't know the timelines that we're looking at exactly. And so a lot of this is, we want to get through November. We want to see what happens with the school bonds, which then helps us have a more confirmed timeline of what will happen with Matthews Elementary. And then I know CMS would be looking for input at that time. If the bonds were to fail, then kind of everything's on hold. And so we don't want to go through a process of helping the community understand what would be the pros and cons of any relocation, what would be the pros and cons of a large park here versus a larger park here, until we have some definitive feedback from CMS. And so we would expect that after November. But that would certainly be something that we would expect a robust public discussion on. We know there's a lot of strong feelings in every direction on that. But this is something that, if I could wave a magic wand and this house was not up for sale right now, that would be preferable. But the market sometimes goes in other directions. And so we felt like we needed to act, because if we do desire to have a park of any size at this location, it does feel like a very important piece to have a wider footprint along Trade Street and a better entranceway. You can maneuver a lot more readily within the property if you have a little bit more space with some road frontage. And so we felt like it was a good buy on the likelihood of being able to have some level of partnership with CMS at this location.
Thank you for that explanation. And I think there should be emphasis on that potential for a partnership with CMS. I think that's an important part, that we are talking about this as it is now, but there are maybe some offsetting cost and possibility on that.
And I guess there's the old saying in the financial world about, what is it, previous results or don't indicate what's going to happen in the future or whatever, but the likelihood of us losing money on this property if we had to sell it again is, I think, very small. It could happen, but land values in Matthews have done nothing but go up consistently for 20 plus years here. So I don't think we would lose money. If we had to sell it back, we could, if we had to. Mr. Garner.
Sorry. I also think that one of the things that I hear most from our constituents is the appreciation of saving open space, and any tree save that goes with that. Parks are always a priority, and this, in my mind, fits sort of the job that I've been given. And so I'm here to support it.
Commissioner Hoover.
Becky, with the tourism fund being knocked down so low, would we incur any more funds to come in, or this is it for the?
So we're looking at just using existing tourism fund balance. It doesn't take into account any excess revenues that we might take in this year above budgeted expenditures. So it's quite possible we have been able to add to the tourism fund balance every year. It's fluctuated a little bit. COVID was obviously some tighter years, but we typically tend to outpace our projected revenues by a couple $100,000 every year.
when would we do you know, when we receive more coming in? That just comes like sporadic?
It comes, it depends on the revenue source, but it comes in monthly. And so, we track it throughout the year, but we're so early in the new fiscal year that it's hard to know exactly how healthy it's going to be. It also runs a couple months in arrears. So, like the prepared food tax, as an example, that runs a couple months in arrears. And so all of that is sometimes a little slow for us to know exactly what the year looks like, but we've had a very healthy run on those revenue lines.
I also like to add, there's certainly nothing would force our hand, but to try to keep up with the Joneses, but a lot of other communities like Matthews all across the state are setting aside big pieces of land in their downtown area and making parks out of them. Cary comes to mind. They just opened a phenomenal park, really forward thinking. And as I said before, Stumptown Park is beloved, but I think we've really outgrown it. It's too small for a town our size, I think. And we're getting to the point where we're going to have to turn people away from going to see concerts and stuff because there's so many people in there you can't even sit down. So being able to have the possibility to significantly increase the footprint of a park in our downtown is I think going to be really important to those that follow us. And when we get it built, it's going to be really nice. Would anybody care to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of 251 South Trade Street and approve the related budget amendments for $500,000 as proposed from the Tourism Fund balance.
Second.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Whitley. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Garner, I'm always glancing your way now because.
Thank you. I was looking for this and I was a little slow on finding it, but I had been looking at the last financial audit and want to read this for Commissioner Hoover, that tourism revenues have increased for 4 consecutive years prior to the beginning of the pandemic in fiscal year 2019-20. Aside from the year of the pandemic, revenues showed an increase of approximately 22.96% from the prior year. So it's going up significantly, and that adds a lot of comfort to knowing what to expect in the future.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes 6-1 with Commissioner Tofano in opposition. Let's move on to item 12C, discuss affordable housing policy. And Commissioner Hoover asked for us to put this on the agenda, so I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hoover.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really just for discussion for the board. This is not to put the town in the affordable housing business. I would like something, if the board desires, to have an affordable housing, what I call policy, added, which would have requirements and regulations for new development to bring in affordable housing, instead of the board asking, oh, are you going to provide for affordable housing? It just, to me, it should be a requirement because it's needed. And I just provided these just so you could see what Mooresville and Davidson was doing. Not saying we got to go by this, you just kind of look at it and get some ideas and pull together and maybe figure something out that we can get affordable housing in the town of Matthews. That's really all this was about.
And the idea is this would be the developers paying for it, right? Certainly, it's a conversation that's come up many times over many, many years, and maybe Mr. Buckley wants to chime in, but I thought we couldn't do that. So I've always been told, we can't do anything unless the state gives us specific authority to do it. So do Davidson and other communities have special authority to mandate affordable housing from developers?
I don't know what authority Mooresville and Davidson had, but it's, as you said, it's been in the past at least, and maybe they got some special legislation, I don't know, but we could do it only in association with third parties, and it would be a voluntary agreement with the third parties. And so that's how we tend to use it through the conditional zoning process, because that is a quote voluntary agreement with the developer. But certainly would be amenable to see what the law is if it's changed, but I'm not sure that it has, but I'm willing to investigate whether or not we can make it a requirement or mandatory, and not just a voluntary agreement.
I think if we can do it, it would be a good thing. I mean, if it's allowable by law. I mean, Commissioner Garner.
I think it would be a great thing too. I know that Davidson has, I don't know, if I say the word frequent, then I couldn't define that exactly, but does have lawsuits that come up against them for their affordable housing policy. So I would be curious to know what that ends up costing the town and what the trade-off is for that. I don't know about Mooresville. I wasn't aware that they had a policy as well.
Commissioner Whitley.
Thank you. I think it's a good thing, and I would like, since we got Malia as our affordable home person, to maybe look at it and get some information for us, see if it's feasible and see how Davidson did it and bring it back to us.
I know Davidson's pretty proud of it. They speak about it a lot. Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
And yeah, I completely concur. I think I'd mentioned I wanted to have a 5:30 about this a few months back. I think it'd make my life a little easier because I'm always fighting with the developer, and you're fighting over tit-tat percentages. It's like 12% to 15%, where if we had that policy, I think it would save a lot of headache, and we could focus on other things in development. So I'm all for it.
Just to add to that comment, one of the things that's given me a lot of heartburn is some of our affordable housing gets through conditional zoning are very temporary, and they're going to be gone in 10 years. And then we're going to have all market rate housing. So we don't have anything. So it's no good. Commissioner Urban.
Like everything, we've talked about parking decks for years, and we're getting closer to it, or actually have a development with a parking deck. And we've been talking about an affordable, attainable housing policy for several years. So I like the fact that everybody's now got it in their lexicon and everybody's sort of beating the same drum in the right direction. Thank you for sort of bringing this to the table. But we've been talking about it for a long time. I guess the problem is that the headwind of the Davidson, there have been lawsuits and things of that nature. But I think the board should be proud of its efforts to date, even though somewhat temporary. I did have staff pull some numbers, and we're at plus or minus about 90 affordable units. And that's at 7% of what we've approved. So the leap from 7% to 12.5% is not that difficult from that aspect of it. So to say that we're not doing anything is I'm not going to use the word disingenuous, but I think we without things in place and without the board just taking it to a zoning petitioner, you will do X, we've done pretty good. Now the question is, can we take it to the next level? And I'm not sure, I read through this and like the things, I'm not sure we're targeting 30% or 50%. I think we need to be cognizant of the report that was done and about where those gaps are, and who we're trying to get the attainable housing for. But this was good information, and we just need to get more involved in it.
Commissioner Hoover.
And just to clarify for me, I'm looking for home ownership. I want affordable homes, families, whomever, to be able to buy a home, not rent for 10 years. Because after 10 years, where are you at? So I'm looking for affordable homes, townhomes or detached single-family homes is my preference, but just filling you in here.
Yeah, we did get that from one developer, the development next to Butler High School, which those were for sale and they're affordable. So the developer agreed to that.
Also, this weekend on Saturday, Renee and I attended Habitat, broke ground for 2 duplex, 2 nice families right in front of the church. And we were able to break ground on that and looking forward to seeing those 2 families. And I'm very excited about that. For the first time they built 2-story duplex there. So they're excited and looking really nice. They're beautiful families that's going to be moving in there.
So just to follow up on it, so there were certainly some recommendations out of the attainable housing study that we had completed. And I know that planning was planning on a UDO update that would include some of this. But what we can do is we can carve out the affordable housing component of that and see if that's something that we can't bring to the board sooner. To Commissioner Garner's point, Davidson has run into some issues with litigation. So we might look to some other policies first and see if there are things that could be gleaned from them, because obviously we would like to avoid any and all of that. But certainly I think it's something that we can bring forward some suggestions to the board with a focus on homeownership. And I think Jay wants to add to that a little bit.
So the timing is perfect. Malia and I just had about an hour and a half conversation with our comp plan consultants, and there's an implementation matrix, and there's several items related to implementing aspects of the affordable housing study and codifying it in the UDO, so that we are already kind of laying that groundwork in advance to you guys, getting a first look at the comp plan soon. So.
And one of the things that we've discussed and argued about, I think, quite a bit, and I'll maybe ask Charlie to comment on this, is our inability to demand for sale property over rental when we're considering a zoning application. That's rooted in state law?
That's correct. The courts have ruled that ownership or lack of ownership is not a part of land use regulation, and therefore the city is without authority to require ownership or apartments. We can't even discuss it. We're not discussing. You can't make that as a part of your decision in a zoning matter.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hoover, for bringing this forward. Mr. Buckley, you're going to maybe bring us back some legal advice on what we can and cannot do in this.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything further, Gina? All right, very good. Thank you for bringing that. Got a fairly quick mayor's report. I want to publicly again thank everyone affiliated with Matthews Alive. I think it was a really successful event. I saw a lot of smiling people. Went really well, with a few hiccups we heard about tonight, but other than that, lots of people here, lots of folks. I got a lot of really good comments about Matthews Alive, so we're thankful for of course, Corey and Leanne and the police and everybody that participated that helped make that a successful event. Secondly, I had an interesting discussion this morning with Ms. Hawk. Received another phone call, and I know many of you have as well, when people are shocked when they have to pay for bulk pickup. Marina, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do we have some information about that on our website? I thought so. I thought you had put that up before, but I tried to explain to this particular resident that called me today. It was the usual complaint. You're charging me more in taxes. I get less service, but we saved $540,000 by switching from our former vendor to Waste Pro, and we're saving about $215,000 a year by not offering free bulk pickup. This particular person that I spoke to apparently uses bulk pickup like every week. So this was very significant for her because she would incur a $25 charge every week. I'm not sure what's generating that much stuff, but that's what she said. So anyway, I don't know what we want to do with that. I'm sure all of you have gotten comments. I know people are not overjoyed that we don't have bulk pickup, but when I talked to the town manager, we don't have an extra $215,000 to accommodate that. I know Commissioner Tufano said perhaps we offer one free bulk pickup or something, but I don't know if that's something we want to address going forward. This particular resident said if we ever have a discussion about our solid waste contract and whatever, that she would like to know about it because she wanted to participate in it or be heard. The other question she asked me, and I didn't have the immediate answer, but is that the contract is for 7 years. Is that correct? 7-year contract with a option to renew for 2 additional years, 2 2-year extensions. So it's a pretty long-term deal. I know we've had a lot of hiccups. We're kind of working through them, but I don't know if anybody else on this board has any comments or thoughts about solid waste pickup. Commissioner Garner?
I want to commend town staff for their proactive approach of monitoring social media feedback and taking that to Waste Pro and having weekly and biweekly meetings to remedy the issues that are coming up. I think that's pretty incredible. And I didn't realize that until I brought an issue forward and they had already taken care of it.
So I think the plan that we agreed to earlier was we were just going to let this simmer out for at least a few months and see how things go. And but I am aware that there are pretty regular complaints about the solid waste pickup because for what maybe they're not looking at our website, but they don't realize there's a fee until they set stuff up. Bulk pickup. Yes, the bulk pickup. So but just for anybody that may still be listening, the other thing that we've discussed, I know in my neighborhood, if you set anything down by the road, somebody comes around and picks it up. Not the garbage company. Just about anything you put, an old TV, a stove, whatever, somebody comes and picks it up. I don't know what they do with them, but so the suggestion that I've passed along to some of our residents is if they have something to pick up for solid waste, to let it sit out for a day or two before they call Waste Pro to pick it up, because oftentimes somebody will just pick it up that's driving through the neighborhood. So that's all I have for my mayor's report. We'll go on to the town attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Yes, yes, sir.
I would like to make an announcement. And this is our third annual Walk for the Cure of Cancer, Leukemia, Non-Hodgkin Lymphoma, and Breast Cancer at Mount Moriah on October. We'll be getting some flyers out to you October the 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 o'clock noon. It's a Walk for Cancer, and we walk from Mount Moriah and go down West Charles Street, down through the sports complex, back Matthews Mill Road, back to the churches. It's a good little walk, but it's a doable walk. But it's all funds that we raised. This is our third year. Of course, I'm twice of those cancer, non-Hodgkin lymphoma and all's leukemia. My wife is a breast cancer. But we are sending all this money, all money raised is going to St. Jude Hospital. We did that last year. I think we sent them a beautiful check and just for those kids who are going through, but we're inviting all of you to be a part of that and come and join, but I'll get a flyer to you before the next meeting so you'll have exactly what you need.
I received one in the mail. I forgot one. So I'm already signed up. So I wasn't asked if I wanted to participate. My wife said, we will be doing this on October 14th. So town manager's report.
Sure. Real quickly, just thank you, Commissioner Garner, for those comments. I know CJ and Maureen and Roz, those three in particular, have been all over it as we've transitioned. And Waste Pro, to their credit, has also been quite responsive. We've seen them go out and meet with communities, actually change some routes around to address some citizen concerns. And so we've seen forward progress as we have moved forward with that transition. But thank you. Staff has worked very hard to help it be as successful as possible. The only other item I wanted to update the board on really quickly is that we have received the bids back on the AV updates for this room, and we are working through them. We expect that it should hopefully be ready for the next board meeting. And we were pleasantly surprised with the numbers that came back from, I believe we had 4 quotes. And so we are expecting to be under budget, but we're vetting through them right now to see just how under budget we might be, but more to come. That is progressing, and that's all.
That's great news. Yeah, we heard one of the public commenters tonight talk about the excessive cost, and I think all of us were kind of shocked with what the initial estimates were. $400,000 or $500,000. So anybody have any further comments for the good of the group before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Those all in favor? All opposed?